The rice hit the floor, and so did her last shred of dignity. Mira Chen had crossed an ocean with nothing but hope in her pockets. Now she was on her knees in front of strangers, picking food from filth, while a cruel merchant stood over her, smiling. This was rock bottom, or so she thought, because in the corner of that miserable shop stood a man who would change everything. A man who saw what she couldn't see yet, that the person crawling on that floor wasn't broken. She was about to become unstoppable. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The door to Pike's Mercantile stuck in its frame the way it always did, swollen from mountain humidity and decades of neglect. Mira had to put her shoulder into it, and when it finally gave way, the hinges screamed loud enough to turn every head in the cramped store. She froze. 5 faces. Maybe 6. All staring. All white. All suddenly quiet. The floorboards creaked under her feet as she stepped inside, and Mira hated how loud everything seemed. The door, her boots, even her breathing. She kept her eyes down and moved toward the counter at the back, past barrels of flour and sacks of dried beans, past shelves stocked with canned goods she couldn't afford to look at. Her hand closed around the coins in her pocket. 3 nickels and 7 pennies. 22 cents total. She'd counted them 4 times that morning. Behind the counter stood Harlan Pike, a man whose gut hung over his belt like a badge of prosperity. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows, and his thick forearms rested on the wooden countertop as he watched her approach. His eyes were small and sharp, the kind that sized people up in seconds and filed them away under categories like useful or trouble or entertainment. Mira fell into the last category. "Help you?" Pike's voice carried across the store, louder than it needed to be. "Rice, please." Her accent curled around the words, softening the hard consonants. She'd been in America for 3 months and 17 days, long enough to know her voice marked her as foreign, not long enough to hide it. Pike didn't move. "Rice." "Yes, please." "How much rice?" Mira's fingers tightened around the coins. She'd done the math. Pike charged 8 cents a pound, which was robbery compared to what she'd heard you could get in Sacramento, but there was no getting to Sacramento from here without money she didn't have. 2 pounds. 2 pounds. Pike scratched his jaw where gray stubble grew in uneven patches. "That'll be 16 cents. She knew that. She nodded. Pike still didn't move. Instead, he glanced past her toward the other customers. A woman in a faded blue dress pretending to examine soap, 2 men in work clothes hovering near the tobacco, an older gentleman by the window. "You hear that? Girl wants 2 pounds of rice." No one responded, but Mira felt their attention like heat on her back. Pike pushed off the counter with a theatrical sigh. "Let me see what I can do for you." He moved with deliberate slowness, walking to a barrel near the back wall. He lifted the lid and peered inside, then looked at Mira with exaggerated concern. "You know, rice is getting expensive, real expensive, shipping costs and all. War trouble overseas." There was no war affecting rice prices. Mira didn't know much, but she knew that. "I have 16 cents, she said quietly. 16 cents. Pike reached into the barrel and pulled out a small tin scoop. "Well, let's see what 16 cents buys these days." He made a show of it, dipping the scoop in, letting grains spill back into the barrel, shaking his head as if the portion troubled him deeply. When he finally poured rice into a paper bag, Mira could see it wasn't even close to 2 pounds. Maybe 1. Maybe less. "There you go." Pike folded the top of the bag and set it on the counter. 16 cents. Mira stared at the bag. It looked like something you'd feed a child for 1 meal, not an adult for several days. "That's not 2 pounds. The words came out before she could stop them. Quiet, but clear. The store went silent again. Different this time, sharper. Pike's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. "Excuse me?" Mira's heart hammered against her ribs, but she'd already started. "You said 8 cents per pound. I gave you 16 cents. That's not 2 pounds. You questioning my measurements?" Swallowed. You're only saying I'm a liar." Pike's voice rose, filling the corners of the store. "That what you're saying? You've been in this country 5 minutes and you're calling me a liar in my own store?" "No, Because I've been running this mercantile for 23 years. 23 years. And in all that time, no one, and I mean no one, has ever accused me of cheating them. He leaned forward, his palms flat on the counter. But here you come, fresh off the boat, can barely speak English, and you're telling me how to run my business. Mira's face burned. I didn't mean, you know what your problem is? Pike didn't wait for an answer. You people come here thinking everything's going to be handed to you, thinking you deserve the same as folks who've been here their whole lives, who built this country with their own hands. You want charity? Go to a church. This is a business. The woman in the blue dress had abandoned all pretense of shopping. The two men near the tobacco were grinning now, enjoying the show. Only the older gentleman by the window seemed uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to say anything. Mira wanted to leave, wanted to run, but she needed that rice. I'm sorry, she said, and hated how small her voice sounded. I'll take it. Pike straightened up, adjusting his suspenders. Now that's more like it. 16 cents. She placed the coins on the counter one by one. Pike counted them with maddening slowness, then swept them into his hand. Pleasure doing business with you. Mira reached for the bag. Pike pulled it back. Hold on now, he said. I need to make sure this is the right amount. Before she could process what was happening, Pike upended the bag. Rice poured onto the counter in a white cascade, grains bouncing and rolling across the scarred wood. Some spilled over the edge onto the floor. Whoops. Pike's expression didn't change. Clumsy of me. Mira stared at the rice scattered across the counter and floor. 22 cents worth of food. All she had. Well, Pike said, brushing his hands together. That's a shame. Store policy says once it touches the floor, I can't sell it. He raised his voice again. Health regulations, you understand. Can't have people getting sick. One of the men by the tobacco snorted. Mira's eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Not here, not in front of them. Of course, Pike continued, leaning against the counter. If you wanted to pick it up yourself, I suppose that's your business. Floor's not that dirty. He paused. Most of it, anyway. The floor was filthy. Mud tracked in from the street, sawdust that hadn't been swept in days, stains Mira didn't want to identify. She looked at the rice, then at Pike, then at the other customers who were all watching with varying degrees of amusement or pity or carefully maintained neutrality. Her stomach had been empty since yesterday afternoon. Mira knelt. The floorboards were rough against her knees. Up close, she could smell decades of grime worked into the wood. She started picking up grains of rice one by one, placing them carefully in her palm. Some were already dirty, covered in sawdust or ground into cracks between boards. She took them anyway. Above her, Pike chatted with the woman in the blue dress about the weather. Beautiful spring they were having. Might get rain later in the week. Mira's vision blurred, but she blinked hard and kept picking, grain by grain. Her back ached from bending. Her knees hurt. Somewhere behind her, one of the men said something too quiet for her to hear, and the other one laughed. She'd left everything behind for this. Her family's small house in Guangdong province. Her mother's grave, which she'd never see again. Her younger brother, who'd cried when she left and made her promise to send money once she found work in America. Gold Mountain, they called it back home. The place where anyone could make a fortune. Mira picked rice from filth and understood exactly how poor a liar that name was. Her fingertips were gray with dirt. She'd recovered maybe half of what spilled. Some had rolled too far under the shelves to reach. Some had fallen into gaps in the floorboards. She cupped what she'd saved in both hands and stood slowly, her legs stiff from kneeling. Pike was weighing tobacco for one of the men, making change, laughing at something. He didn't look at her. Mira didn't have a bag anymore. She looked around for something, anything, to carry the rice in. You need something. Pike's voice was flat now, bored. A bag, please. Bags cost a penny. She didn't have a penny. She'd given him everything. Mira stood there, rice cupped in her dirty hands like an offering to gods who'd long since stopped listening. The weight of every eye in that store pressed down on her shoulders. The old gentleman by the window was looking out at the street now, deliberately not seeing her. The woman in the blue dress examined her fingernails. No bag then, I guess. Pike returned to his tobacco. You have a good day now. She couldn't leave. Couldn't walk back to her boarding house through town with rice cupped in her bare hands like some kind of beggar performing for coins. Couldn't. Movement in the corner caught her eye. There was a man there. Had been there the whole time, she realized. So still and quiet, she'd somehow missed him. He was sitting on a wooden crate near the back wall, half hidden behind a display of rope and tools. Tall, even sitting down, she could tell he was tall. Broad-shouldered, wearing a canvas coat despite the mild weather. Dark hair that needed cutting, a beard that needed trimming, eyes that were watching everything with an expression she couldn't read. As Mira looked at him, he stood. The movement wasn't hurried, but something about it made everyone in the store pause. The man unfolded himself from the crate and stepped into the light, and Mira revised her estimate of his height. Not just tall, huge. 6.5 feet at least, with the kind of build that came from years of hard labor, not from wanting to look strong. He walked toward the counter with deliberate steps, boot heels solid against the floorboards. Pike looked up from his tobacco, and Mira saw something flicker across the merchant's face. Not quite fear, but not comfort either. "Cole." Pike's voice had changed, less performance in it now. "Didn't see you back there. You need something?" The man, Cole, didn't answer immediately. He looked at the rice scattered on the floor, then at Mira's cupped hands, then at Pike. "I need supplies," Cole said finally. His voice was deep and rough, like he didn't use it often. "Flour, 20 pounds, salt pork, coffee, dried beans." He paused. "And rice." Pike's hand hovered over his tobacco. "How much rice?" "Whatever you got in that barrel." That's 40 pounds of rice, Cole." "I can count." Pike's jaw worked for a moment. "That's gonna run you." "I know what it costs." Cole reached into his coat and pulled out a leather wallet, worn smooth with age. He counted bills onto the counter with the same deliberate care he seemed to bring to every movement. "That cover it?" Pike stared at the money. More than enough to cover it, Mira guessed, based on the way the merchant's eyes widened slightly. "Yeah," Pike said. "Yeah, that'll cover it." "Good." Cole pushed the bills across the counter. "Box it all up." Pike hesitated, then started moving, pulling supplies from shelves with none of the theatrical slowness he'd shown Mira. The woman in the blue dress watched with open interest now. The two men by the tobacco had gone quiet. Cole turned to Mira. Up close, she could see his face was weathered, lined around the eyes and mouth in a way that made his age hard to guess. 40? 50? His eyes were gray, pale as creek stone. "You got somewhere to put that rice?" he asked. Mira's voice caught in her throat. She shook her head. Cole looked at Pike, who was measuring out flour with his back turned. "The rice she spilled. That paid for?" Pike's shoulders stiffened. "Well, Simple question. She gave you money. You spilled the rice. That paid for or not?" "Store policy says..." "Harlan." Just the one word. Just the name. But something in how Cole said it made Pike stop talking. The merchant turned around slowly. "It was paid for." "Then give her a bag for it." Pike's mouth opened. Closed. He reached under the counter and produced a small paper bag, which he set on the counter hard enough to make a sharp smack. "Thank you," Cole said, in a tone that wasn't thankful at all. He picked up the bag and held it open toward Mira. "Go ahead." She stared at him, trying to understand what was happening, trying to figure out the trick, the catch, the moment where this turned into another humiliation. "It's clean," Cole said, as if reading her mind. "Just a bag." Mira tilted her hands and let the rice fall into the bag with a soft whisper. Cole folded the top and handed it to her. "Thank you," she managed. Cole nodded once, then returned to the counter where Pike was stacking his supplies. The merchant worked in silence now, all his earlier chatter gone. He boxed everything up, tied the boxes with twine, and pushed them across the counter. Cole gathered the boxes easily. The weight that would have taken 2 men to carry seemed like nothing to him. He tucked them under his arms, against his chest, balancing them with the ease of long practice. Then he stopped and looked at Mira again. "You know how to work?" The question caught her off guard. "What?" "Work. You know how to work hard?" Yes, I can work." "You got employment?" Mira shook her head. She'd been trying. God, she'd been trying. But no one in this town wanted to hire a Chinese girl who barely spoke English. Cole shifted the boxes slightly, thinking. I got a cabin up in the mountains, 3 hours north of here. Land needs tending, fences need mending, firewood needs cutting, garden needs planting. He paused. It's hard work, long days, but there's a roof and regular meals. Mira's heart started beating faster. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you work. You do the work, you earn your keep. That fair? She wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to grab onto this lifeline with both hands. But some part of her, the part that had survived 3 months in this country by being careful, held back. I don't know you, she said quietly. No, you don't. I don't know what you want. Cole's expression didn't change. I want someone to help maintain my property, that's all. He glanced at Pike, who was watching this exchange with barely concealed anger. You want a reference. Harlan here can tell you I pay my debts and mind my own business. Pike's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Cole Mercer's a hard man, but he's honest. Cole looked back at Mira. Your choice. You want the work? Meet me outside in 5 minutes. You don't, I understand. No hard feelings. He walked toward the door without waiting for an answer, boxes stacked in his arms. The door stuck again, and he kicked it open with one boot, then disappeared into the street. Mira stood holding her bag of rice, very aware that everyone in the store was looking at her again. I wouldn't, the woman in the blue dress said suddenly. Go off alone with a strange man to the middle of nowhere? Girl like you? She shook her head. That's how you end up dead in a ditch. One of the men by the tobacco grunted agreement. Cole's odd. Always been odd. Lives up there like some kind of hermit. Ain't natural. Pike leaned against the counter, his earlier anger replaced by something that might have been concern if Mira trusted his motives at all. Woman's right. You don't know him. Could be dangerous. Mira looked at the rice in her hands. 22 cents worth. Maybe enough for 3 days if she was careful. And then what? She had no job, no family, no prospects. She was living in a boarding house that charged more per week than she could afford, and Mrs. Henderson had already told her if she couldn't make next week's payment, she'd be out on the street. Where is this cabin? She asked Pike. North Ridge, 3-4 hours on foot. Remote as hell. No neighbors for miles. Has he hurt anyone? This Cole Mercer? Pike shifted his weight. Not that I know of. But you don't know. No one knows much about Cole. He keeps to himself. Comes to town maybe once a month for supplies. Pays cash. Doesn't cause trouble. Pike spread his hands. That's all I can tell you. Mira looked at the rice again. Then at the floor where she'd knelt. Then at the door. She'd crossed an ocean to get here. Had spent 6 weeks in the hull of a ship, sick and terrified, because she believed America was better than starving in Guangdong province. Had endured immigration officers who treated her like livestock, labor brokers who tried to sell her contract to men with hungry eyes, night after night in cheap rooms wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. Every choice had been a gamble. Every step a leap into uncertainty. What was one more? Thank you for the rice, Mira said to Pike, in a voice that was steadier than she felt. She walked toward the door. Behind her, the woman in the blue dress said, Well, don't say we didn't warn you. Mira pushed through the sticky door and stepped into the afternoon sunlight. The street was mostly empty, a few people going about their business, a wagon parked outside the feed store, chickens pecking in the dirt. Mountain View wasn't much of a town. One main street, maybe 30 buildings total, surrounded by pine forest and granite peaks that turned gold in the evening light. Cole was standing beside the wagon, loading his boxes into the back. Up close, the wagon looked old but well-maintained, solid wheels, sturdy frame, a patient mule in the traces. Mira approached slowly. Cole secured the last box and turned to face her. You coming or thinking about it? I'm coming. She paused. But I need to get my things from the boarding house. How much you got? Not much. A bag, some clothes. Cole nodded. Get them. I'll wait. Mira hesitated. You won't leave? Something that might have been understanding crossed Cole's weathered face. I'll be right here. She believed him. Didn't know why, but she did. The boarding house was 2 streets over, a sagging Victorian with peeling paint and a porch that tilted to one side. Mrs. Henderson was in the kitchen when Mira came in, and she looked up from her dishes with obvious surprise. Back already? Thought you'd be out looking for work all day. I found work, Mira said. Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose. Did you now? Where? Mountain cabin, north of town. The older woman's hand stilled in the dishwater. North Ridge? That's Cole Mercer's land. Yes. Huh. Mrs. Henderson pulled her hands out of the water and dried them on her apron. Well, that's unexpected. You know him? Know of him. He's been up there, 8 years now? 10? Doesn't bother anyone. Doesn't cause trouble. She studied Mira with sharp eyes. You sure about this? No, Mira said honestly. But I'm going anyway. Mrs. Henderson nodded slowly. You got grit, I'll give you that. Most girls in your position would have given up by now. She pulled off her apron. Come on, I'll help you pack. Mira's room was barely bigger than a closet. A narrow bed, a washstand, a hook on the wall for clothes. She'd been living out of the same canvas bag she'd carried from San Francisco. It didn't take long to pack. 3 dresses, all worn. Underclothes, a spare pair of shoes, a photo of her mother wrapped in cloth, a Chinese-English dictionary she'd bought for a nickel. Mrs. Henderson watched from the doorway. You owe me for 4 days. I know. Mira didn't have it. They both knew she didn't have it. The older woman sighed. Consider it forgiven. You've been a quiet tenant, kept your room clean. That's worth something. She paused. But Mira, be careful up there. Man lives alone that long. There's usually a reason. I will. And if things go bad, if he tries anything, you come straight back here, hear me? Don't be proud. Don't try to tough it out. Just run. Mira nodded, touched by the unexpected concern. Thank you. For everything. Yeah, well. Mrs. Henderson cleared her throat. Good luck. The walk back to the mercantile took 5 minutes. Cole was exactly where he'd said he'd be, leaning against the wagon with his arms crossed. He straightened when he saw her approaching. Ready? Mira lifted her bag. This is everything. Cole took the bag from her and placed it in the wagon bed with his supplies. Then he moved to the mule and started checking the harness. You know how to ride? He asked. No. You'll learn. For now, you can sit in the back with the supplies. Mira climbed into the wagon bed, settling herself between boxes of flour and coffee. The wood was sun-warmed under her hands. Cole swung up onto the driver's seat with easy grace for such a big man and gathered the reins. Last chance, he said, not looking at her. You change your mind. Say so now. Mira thought about the boarding house, about Pike's Mercantile and the rice on the floor, about 3 months of closed doors and hostile stares and the slow, crushing weight of realizing that Gold Mountain was just another lie. I haven't changed my mind. Cole made a sound that might have been approval or might have been nothing. He snapped the reins and the mule started forward. Mountain View fell away behind them. They took the north road out of town, past the last few scattered houses and into the pine forest. The afternoon sun slanted through the trees, throwing long shadows across the road. The wagon wheels creaked in a steady rhythm. Somewhere high above, a hawk called out. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Mira watched the landscape change. The dense pine forest gave way to rocky slopes dotted with juniper and manzanita. The road, barely more than a rutted track, climbed steadily, winding around granite outcroppings and across small streams. The air grew cooler, thinner. Cole drove with the same deliberate calm he seemed to bring to everything. His hands on the reins were steady. His eyes scanned the trail ahead, reading the terrain with practiced ease. After an hour, Mira worked up the courage to speak. Why did you help me? Cole didn't answer immediately. The wagon lurched over a rock and he adjusted the reins. Didn't like watching it, he said finally. Watching what? What Pike did. Mira waited, but Cole didn't elaborate. She tried again. You do that often? Help strangers? No. Then why me? Cole glanced back at her, his gray eyes unreadable in the shadowed light. Because you picked that rice up off the floor. Most people would have walked away. too proud. But you got down on your knees and picked it up because you needed it. He turned back to the road. That told me something. What did it tell you? That you're practical. That you're willing to do what needs doing, even when it costs you. He paused. That's useful in the mountains. Mira wasn't sure if she should feel complimented or reduced to a tool. She settled for changing the subject. How long have you lived up here? 9 years. Alone? Yes. Why? Cole's shoulders shifted in what might have been a shrug. Suits me. It was clear he wasn't going to offer more, so Mira stopped asking questions. They continued in silence as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The temperature dropped. Mira pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The road grew steeper, narrower. Pine trees gave way to bare rock and hardy shrubs that clung to cracks in the granite. When Mira looked back, she could see Mountain View far below, just a scatter of buildings in a valley that was rapidly filling with shadow. She'd never been this high before, never been this far from other people. The fear she'd been holding at bay started creeping in. Mrs. Henderson's warnings echoed in her head. Man lives alone that long, there's usually a reason. The woman in the blue dress. That's how you end up dead in a ditch. What did she really know about Cole Mercer? That he'd embarrassed Harlan Pike, that he'd offered her a job, that he was taking her to a remote cabin miles from anyone who could help if things went wrong. She'd trusted him based on nothing but instinct and desperation. Mira's hand moved to her pocket, where she'd hidden the small knife she used for sewing. It wasn't much, wouldn't stop a man Cole's size. But it was something. As if sensing her thoughts, Cole spoke without turning around. There's a pistol under the driver's seat, a Colt revolver, loaded. His voice was matter of fact. You ever need it? It's there. Mira stared at his back. Why are you telling me this? Because you're scared. I can hear it in how quiet you've gone. Cole shifted the reins to one hand and pointed ahead, where the road curved around a massive boulder. We're almost there. Once we arrive, I'll show you where everything is. The cabin, the well, the shed. I'll show you where I sleep and where you'll sleep. Then I'll make supper and we'll eat, and you'll see I'm just a man who lives alone because he prefers it that way. He glanced back at her again, and in the fading light his expression was softer than she'd seen it. I'm not going to hurt you, Mira. You got my word on that. But I understand you don't know me well enough to trust that yet. So you keep that knife handy if it makes you feel safer, and you remember where that pistol is. Mira's throat tightened. Thank you. Nothing to thank me for, just common sense. They rounded the boulder, and the cabin came into view. It sat in a small clearing carved out of the mountainside, backed by a sheer granite cliff that rose another 100 feet. The cabin itself was built from logs, weathered gray but solid-looking, with a stone chimney and a covered porch. Nearby stood a smaller shed, and beyond that, Mira could see the beginnings of what looked like a garden plot, though nothing was growing there yet. A stream ran along the edge of the clearing, bright with snowmelt. Pine trees ringed the space, their branches swaying in the evening breeze. It was beautiful. Isolated and harsh, but beautiful. Cole brought the wagon to a stop near the cabin and set the brake. He climbed down stiffly, the first sign Mira had seen that he was anything other than tireless, and started unloading supplies. Mira climbed out of the wagon bed on shaky legs. 3 hours of sitting had left her stiff and sore. Help me get these inside, Cole said, handing her a box of coffee. Then I'll show you around. They worked in silence, carrying boxes from the wagon to the cabin. The interior was dim and spare. One main room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table, 2 chairs, shelves stacked with supplies. A doorway led to what Mira assumed was a bedroom. Cole noticed her looking. That's my room. You'll sleep out here for now. He pointed to a corner where blankets were folded neatly on a wooden trunk. Not much privacy, but it's warm. Later, if you stay, I'll section off part of the main room, give you your own space. If you stay, not when. He was leaving her a way out. It's fine, Mira said. Cole nodded and kept working. When the last box was inside, he went back out and unhitched the mule, leading it to a small corral behind the shed. Mira followed, watching as he checked the animal's hooves and filled a trough with water from the stream. Her name's Daisy, Cole said. 14 years old, stubborn as hell but reliable. He straightened, wiping his hands on his pants. Come on, I'll show you the well. The well was 20 yards from the cabin, covered with a wooden lid and a rope and bucket system. Cole pulled up a bucket of water, clear and cold, and offered it to Mira. She drank gratefully. She hadn't realized how thirsty she was. "Good water up here," Cole said. "Clean. Never runs dry, even in summer." He showed her the garden plot next, a rectangle of turned earth maybe 30 feet by 20. "Needs planting. That'll be one of your jobs. I've got seeds in the shed, potatoes, carrots, beans, squash. We get frost up here as late as May, so we have to time it right." "I've never gardened before," Mira admitted. "You'll learn." "How do you know I will?" Cole looked at her with those pale gray eyes. "Because you picked rice off a dirty floor. If you can do that, you can learn to plant vegetables." They walked back to the cabin as full dark settled over the mountains. Cole lit a kerosene lamp, then built a fire in the hearth. The flames caught quickly, crackling and popping, filling the room with warmth and dancing light. "Sit," Cole said, gesturing to one of the chairs. "I'll make supper." Mira sat, grateful to be off her feet. She watched as Cole moved around the small kitchen area with economical precision. He sliced salt pork into a cast-iron skillet, added beans from a jar, chopped an onion with quick, practiced strokes. Within 20 minutes, he had 2 plates of food ready. He set one in front of Mira, beans and pork, a thick slice of bread, butter. More food than she'd seen in days. "Eat," Cole said, settling into the other chair with his own plate. Mira ate. The food was simple but good, seasoned with salt and pepper and something else she couldn't identify. The bread was dense and filling. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite, and then she had to force herself to slow down, to not devour everything like an animal. Cole ate steadily, not watching her, which she appreciated. When they'd both finished, he collected the plates and washed them in a basin, then set them on a shelf to dry. "Daylight comes early up here," he said. "We'll start work at dawn. I'll wake you." "What will I do?" "Tomorrow? Fix the fence along the south pasture. Whole sections coming down. After that, start turning the garden soil. Get it ready for planting." He paused. "You'll be sore. Work up here is harder than town work, but you'll get used to it." Mira nodded. "How much will you pay me?" "Room and board, plus $1 a week cash once you prove you can handle the work." $1 a week wasn't much, but it was more than nothing, and room and board meant she wouldn't starve. "That's fair," she said. "Good." Cole moved toward his bedroom door. "Blankets are in that trunk, pillow too. Outhouse is behind the cabin. Watch for snakes. Fire should last through the night, but if it goes out, wood's stacked by the hearth." He paused in the doorway, looking back at her. "You did good today, Mira. Took courage to come up here with a stranger. Not many people have that kind of courage." Before she could respond, he closed the door. Mira sat alone in the flickering firelight, listening to the wind move through the pines outside. Her body ached. Her hands were still dirty from picking rice off Pike's floor. She was in a strange cabin on a mountainside with a man she'd met 4 hours ago, but her stomach was full. And for the first time in 3 months, she felt something that might have been hope. She opened the trunk and pulled out the blankets. Thick wool, soft from years of use. She spread them on the floor near the fire and lay down, still fully dressed. Through the cabin's single window, she could see stars. More stars than she'd ever seen in her life, scattered across the sky like rice spilled across a dark floor. Mira closed her eyes and, despite everything, slept. Dawn came cold and gray, bleeding through the window in shades of steel. Mira woke to the sound of the cabin door opening and closing, followed by the crunch of boots on gravel outside. She sat up, disoriented, muscles screaming in protest. Sleeping on the floor had done her no favors. The fire had burned down to embers. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and stood, wincing as her back reminded her exactly how many hours she'd spent in that wagon yesterday. Through the window, she could see Cole near the woodpile, an axe in his hands. He swung it in a smooth arc, splitting a log with a crack that echoed off the granite cliff. Mira folded the blankets and splashed cold water on her face from the basin Cole had left near the hearth. Her reflection in the small mirror above it looked tired, her hair a mess, dark circles under her eyes. She tried to finger comb it into something presentable and mostly failed. The door opened again. Cole stepped inside, carrying an armload of split wood that he stacked by the fireplace. He glanced at her without comment, then set about building up the fire. "Coffee's on," he said, nodding toward a pot on the iron hook above the flames. "Bread's in the tin. Help yourself." Mira poured coffee into a tin cup, the steam rising in the cold air. The bread was yesterday's, dense and slightly stale, but she ate it anyway. Cole worked on the fire until it was crackling properly, then straightened and dusted off his hands. "You sleep?" "Some." "Floor too hard?" "I've slept on worse." Cole grunted, which might have been approval. He poured his own coffee and drank it black, standing by the fire. "We've got about 2 hours before the sun's high enough to work by. Fence won't fix itself, though." "You said dawn." "I said I'd wake you at dawn. Didn't say we'd start at dawn." He finished his coffee in 3 long swallows. "Get dressed warm. It's colder than it looks." Mira changed behind the trunk, pulling on her warmest dress and the spare shawl she'd brought. When she emerged, Cole was checking supplies in a wooden toolbox: hammer, nails, wire, pliers. He added a coil of rope and closed the lid. "Ready?" She nodded, though she wasn't sure what she was supposed to be ready for. They walked south from the cabin, following a narrow trail through the pines. The morning air was sharp enough to hurt Mira's lungs. Frost clung to the ground in shadowed patches, crunching under their boots. Cole moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew every rock and root on this path. After 15 minutes, they reached the fence, or what was left of it. A long section had collapsed, posts tilted at drunken angles, wire sagging or snapped entirely. Beyond the fence, the ground dropped away steeply, covered in loose scree and scrub brush. Cole set down the toolbox and surveyed the damage. "Rockslide came through here last month. Took out about 40 feet of fence." He glanced at Mira. "You ever build a fence before?" "No." "Figures." He pulled out the hammer and a handful of nails. "First thing you need to know is fence work is about patience. You rush it, it falls apart. You take your time, it lasts." He spent the next 20 minutes showing her how to set a post, digging the hole deep enough that frost wouldn't heave it out of the ground, packing rocks around the base for stability, making sure it stood plumb before tamping down the dirt. Mira watched carefully, trying to memorize each step. "Now you try," Cole said, handing her a shovel. The ground was harder than it looked, rocky and stubborn, fighting her with every thrust of the shovel. Mira's hands, still soft from town living, started blistering within minutes. She gritted her teeth and kept digging. Cole watched without comment. When the hole was finally deep enough, he helped her set the post, then stepped back to let her do the rest. She packed rocks around the base the way he'd shown her, then started tamping down the dirt. Her shoulders burned. Sweat ran down her back despite the cold. "Good enough," Cole said when she'd been at it for 10 minutes. "Move on to the next one." By mid-morning, they'd set 4 posts. Mira's hands were raw, her back ached, and she'd developed a throbbing pain between her shoulder blades that wouldn't quit. Cole worked beside her with mechanical efficiency, setting 2 posts for every one of hers, never seeming to tire. They took a break when the sun was directly overhead. Cole produced 2 canteens of water and some jerky from his coat pocket. They sat on a flat rock overlooking the valley below, chewing in silence. "You're slower than I'd like," Cole said finally. "But you're thorough. That's something." Mira wasn't sure if she'd been complimented or criticized. She drank her water and didn't respond. "How long you been in America?" Cole asked. 3 months. "Where from?" "Guangdong Province, southern China." Cole nodded as if this meant something to him. "Long trip." 6 weeks by ship." "You come alone?" "Yes. That takes guts." He bit off another piece of jerky. "What made you leave?" Mira hesitated. She'd told this story before, to immigration officials who didn't care and labor brokers who cared for the wrong reasons. But something about the way Cole asked, casual, no judgment in his voice, made her answer honestly. "My mother died 2 years ago. My father died when I was 8. I have a younger brother, but there wasn't enough work for both of us." She watched a hawk circle over the valley. "I thought if I came here, I could send money back. Help him." "You send any yet?" "No." "Because you haven't found work." "Because no one wants to hire me." The bitterness crept into her voice before she could stop it. I've tried everything. Laundry, cleaning, cooking, mending. But they see me and they... She trailed off. They see Chinese and they shut the door. Mira looked at him, surprised by his directness. Cole shrugged. It's how it is. Doesn't make it right, but it's how it is. He stood, brushing crumbs from his pants. Come on, still got 20 feet of fence to finish. They worked through the afternoon. Mira's hands went from painful to numb, which was almost worse. She could feel blisters forming, breaking, forming again. Her back felt like someone had driven nails into her spine. But she didn't stop, didn't ask for a break, didn't complain. Cole noticed anyway. Let me see your hands, he said when they'd set the last post. Mira held them out. The palms were raw and bleeding in places, dirt ground into the wounds. Cole made a disapproving sound. Should have said something. You didn't ask. Didn't think I'd need to. He pulled a cloth from his pocket and wrapped it around her worst hand. When we get back, you'll wash these and put salve on them. Otherwise, they'll get infected. I'm fine. You're bleeding through your skin. That's not fine. He started gathering the tools. Stubbornness is useful, Mira, but stupidity will get you killed up here. Know the difference. The walk back to the cabin felt twice as long as the walk out. Mira's legs shook with exhaustion. She stumbled twice on the trail, catching herself at the last second. Cole pretended not to notice, but he slowed his pace. When they finally reached the clearing, the sun was already sinking behind the western peaks, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. Cole went to tend to Daisy while Mira collapsed onto the porch steps. She'd worked hard before. Worked long days washing clothes, scrubbing floors, hauling water. But this was different. This was labor that demanded everything you had and then asked for more. Cole returned from the corral and climbed the porch steps, sitting down beside her. He pulled out a small tin from his pocket and opened it. Some kind of greasy salve that smelled like pine and something medicinal. Give me your hands. Mira held them out. Cole took the first one and unwrapped the cloth, examining the damage with a clinical eye. Then he started applying the salve, his large fingers surprisingly gentle. The salve stung at first, then went cool. This'll help them heal faster, he said. But they're going to hurt like hell tonight. Tomorrow too, probably. And the day after? Day after that, you'll start growing calluses. Won't hurt as much. He finished with the first hand and moved to the second. You did good today. Better than I expected. I was slow. You were learning. That's different. He capped the tin and handed it to her. Use this every night before bed. Morning too, if they're still raw. Mira looked at the tin, then at Cole. Thank you. It's just salve. For everything, the job, the fence, this. Cole stood, brushing off his pants. You earned it. Now come on. I'll teach you how to cook venison stew. Over the next 2 weeks, Mira learned what it meant to work mountain land. She learned that water had to be hauled from the well every morning, that firewood had to be split and stacked before it could be burned, that nothing came easy and everything took longer than you thought. Cole taught her to recognize which plants were edible and which would make you sick, how to read the weather by watching the clouds gather over the peaks, how to sharpen an axe on a whetstone, holding the blade at just the right angle, how to shoot the Colt revolver he kept under the driver's seat in case she ever needed to scare off a bear or a mountain lion. Aim for center mass, Cole said, standing behind her as she raised the pistol with shaking hands. Don't try for the head. You're not that good yet. Just point and squeeze the trigger. The noise alone will probably send most animals running. The pistol kicked harder than Mira expected. The shot went wide, splintering bark off a pine tree 20 feet from where she'd been aiming. Again, Cole said. By the time they'd gone through a box of ammunition, Mira could at least hit the tree she was aiming at. Cole declared it good enough and took the gun back. You'll practice once a week, he said. Ammunition's expensive, but knowledge is more expensive. The garden went in slowly. Mira turned the soil until her back screamed, picking out rocks and roots, mixing in compost Cole had been building for years. He showed her how deep to plant each seed, how far apart, how much water they'd need. Potatoes go deepest, he explained, kneeling in the dirt beside her. Carrots need loose soil or they'll grow crooked. Beans climb, so we'll string them along the fence. How do you know all this? My mother. Cole patted down soil over a row of seeds. She kept a garden twice this size back in Missouri. Made me help her every spring. His voice went distant. Said if a man couldn't grow his own food, he wasn't much of a man. It was the first personal thing he'd volunteered. Mira wanted to ask more about his mother, about Missouri, about why he'd ended up alone on a mountain in California, but Cole stood and brushed off his hands, the moment closing. That's enough for today. Sun's getting low. They fell into a rhythm. Wake at dawn, coffee and bread. Work until noon. Brief lunch. More work until dinner. Eat. Sit by the fire. Sleep. Repeat. Mira's hands developed calluses. Her muscles stopped screaming and started cooperating. She learned to swing an axe without it slipping from her grip, to carry 2 full buckets of water from the well without spilling, to split kindling with quick, efficient strokes. Cole remained mostly silent, speaking only when necessary. But Mira began to understand his silences. The grunt that meant approval. The slight shake of his head that meant she was doing something wrong. The way he'd step in without comment when a task was beyond her strength, helping her finish it, then walking away as if nothing had happened. One evening, about 3 weeks after she'd arrived, Mira was washing dishes when she noticed Cole watching her from his chair by the fire. "What?" she asked. "You're different." "Different how?" Cole considered his words. "When you got off that wagon, you looked like you'd break if someone breathed on you wrong. Now," he gestured vaguely, "now you look like you belong here." Mira glanced down at herself. Her dress was stained and patched. Her hands were rough and scarred. Her hair, which she'd tried so hard to keep neat in town, was pulled back in a simple braid. She looked nothing like the girl who'd stepped into Pike's Mercantile a month ago. "I don't know if that's a compliment," she said. "It is." That night, lying in her blankets by the fire, Mira realized she hadn't thought about Mountain View in days. Hadn't thought about the boarding house or Mrs. Henderson or the humiliation of kneeling on Pike's floor. Up here, those things felt distant, like they'd happened to someone else. She slept better than she had in months. The next morning, Cole announced they needed supplies. "We're low on flour and salt," he said over breakfast, "and I want to get more ammunition. Saw cougar tracks near the south fence yesterday." Mira's stomach dropped. "We're going to town." "Have to, unless you know another way to get supplies." The thought of returning to Mountain View made Mira's hand shake. She set down her coffee cup before Cole could notice. "When?" "Tomorrow. We'll leave early, get there by noon, be back before dark." Mira nodded, trying to keep her face neutral, but her mind was already racing. Pike would be there. The woman in the blue dress. The men who'd laughed. Everyone who'd watched her pick rice off the floor. Cole was watching her again. "You don't have to come." "I want to." "No, you don't. You're scared." Mira looked up sharply. "I'm not. It's all right to be scared. You've been through something up here. Built yourself back up. Going back down means facing the people who saw you at your lowest." Cole poured more coffee. "But Mira, you're not the same person who left. You need to know that." "I know." "Do you?" Cole leaned back in his chair. "Because I look at you and I see someone who can swing an axe for 6 hours, who can shoot a pistol without flinching, who can work a garden plot until her hands bleed. That's not the same girl Pike pushed around. He didn't push me around. He made you kneel on his filthy floor for rice you'd already paid for. That's worse than pushing." Mira's jaw tightened. Cole was right, but hearing it said out loud brought the shame flooding back. "I'll come," she said quietly. "I need to face it." Cole nodded. "All right then. We leave at dawn." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Cole made a list of supplies while Mira checked their food stores, counting what they had left, calculating what they'd need to last another month. The work was methodical, calming. It gave her something to focus on besides the knot of anxiety in her stomach. That evening, Cole disappeared into his bedroom and emerged with a bundle wrapped in cloth. He set it on the table in front of Mira. "What's this?" "Open it." Mira unwrapped the cloth to find a dress. Not fancy, but clean and well-made. A simple gray cotton with buttons up the front. Under it was a pair of boots, worn but sturdy, far better than the thin shoes she'd been wearing. "Where did these come from?" "They were my wife's." The words hung in the air. Mira looked up at Cole, who was staring into the fire, his expression unreadable. You were married? Long time ago. Cole's voice was flat. She died 9 years back. That's when I came up here. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. He nodded toward the dress. They'll fit you better than what you've got. You should look like you have a home. When we go to town. Mira touched the fabric. It was softer than her own dresses, better quality. The fact that Cole was offering it, that he'd kept these things for 9 years and was now giving them to her, made her throat tight. Thank you, she managed. Cole stood abruptly. I'm going to check on Daisy. You should get some sleep. Long day tomorrow. He left before she could say anything else. Mira held the dress up to the lamplight, examining the careful stitching, the small repairs where it had been mended. Someone had loved this dress. Someone Cole had loved enough to keep her things even after she was gone. She folded it carefully and set it aside, then lay down in her blankets. But sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept circling back to tomorrow, to Pike's Mercantile, to all those faces staring at her. Cole was right. She wasn't the same person. But would that be enough? Dawn came too quickly. Mira woke to find Cole already up, the wagon hitched and ready outside. She dressed in the gray cotton dress. It fit almost perfectly, just a little loose in the shoulders, and laced up the boots. They were more comfortable than anything she'd worn in months. Cole looked at her when she emerged from the cabin, and something shifted in his expression. Not quite approval, but something close. Ready? He asked. No, but let's go anyway. The journey down was faster than the climb up had been. The road was familiar now, the landmarks recognizable. Mira watched Mountain View grow larger in the valley below, her anxiety building with each turn of the wagon wheels. By the time they reached the outskirts of town, her palms were sweating despite the cool morning air. Cole pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the Mercantile. The same Mercantile. The same door that stuck. Through the window, Mira could see Pike behind the counter, serving a customer. You want to wait here? Cole asked. Mira took a breath. No. She climbed down from the wagon before she could change her mind. Her legs felt unsteady, but she forced them to carry her toward that door. Cole walked beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. The door stuck. Mira put her shoulder into it, and when it opened, the hinges screamed just like before. Every head turned. Pike looked up from his customer, an older man Mira didn't recognize. The merchant's eyes widened slightly when he saw her, then narrowed. The woman in the blue dress was there too, examining fabric near the window. She stopped mid-fold when Mira walked in. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Cole stepped past Mira and walked straight to the counter. Need to get supplies, Harlan. Pike's attention snapped to Cole. Cole, didn't expect to see you back so soon. Month's a month. Cole pulled out his list. I'll need flour, salt, coffee, more ammunition for the Colt, and rice. At the word rice, Pike's eyes flicked to Mira. She met his gaze and didn't look away. How much rice? Pike asked, his voice carefully neutral. 10 pounds. That's a lot of rice. It's what I need. Pike hesitated, then started gathering supplies. The older man at the counter paid for his purchase and left quickly, clearly uncomfortable with the tension in the room. The woman in the blue dress pretended to be absorbed in her fabric, but Mira could feel her watching. Cole stood at the counter, arms crossed, while Pike weighed out flour and salt. Mira moved deeper into the store, her boots solid on the floorboards. The same floorboards where she'd knelt, the same dirt and sawdust ground into the wood. She looked at it all and felt nothing. No shame, no anger. Just a distant observation that this was where it had happened. Pike finished with the flour and moved to the rice barrel. He scooped out 10 pounds with exaggerated care, weighing it twice, then poured it into a sturdy bag and tied it closed. He set it on the counter next to the other supplies. That'll be, Pike calculated in his head, his fingers tapping the counter. $4.30. Cole counted out bills. $4.30. Pike took the money and made change. 2 silver dollars, 3 dimes, 2 nickels. He counted it out loud, placing each coin on the counter. $4.30 in supplies. Your change is $2.40. Cole scooped up the coins without counting them and pocketed them. Then he started loading supplies into the wooden crate he'd brought from the wagon. Mira watched Pike. The merchant's movements were stiff, controlled. None of the casual cruelty from before. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Mira, Cole said, not looking up from his packing. Check the rice. Make sure it's the right weight. It was a test. Or maybe a statement. Either way, every person in that store heard it. Mira walked to the counter and lifted the bag of rice. It was heavy, solid, felt like 10 pounds. It's right, she said clearly. Pike's jaw worked. Of course it's right. I don't cheat my customers. No, Mira said, meeting his eyes. You just humiliate them. The words were out before she could stop them. The woman in the blue dress drew in a sharp breath. Pike's face went red. Now you listen here. Careful, Harlan. Cole's voice was quiet, but it cut through Pike's bluster like a knife. Real careful. Pike's mouth opened, closed. He looked at Cole, then at Mira, then back at Cole. I run an honest business, he said finally, but the fight had gone out of his voice. Then run it honestly. Cole picked up the crate of supplies. We done here? Pike nodded stiffly. Cole headed for the door. Mira followed, but paused at the threshold. She turned back to look at Pike one last time. The merchant stood behind his counter, smaller somehow than she remembered, diminished, not by anything she'd done, but by the simple fact that she was standing there, in clean clothes and sturdy boots, looking at him like he was nothing special. Thank you for the supplies, Mira said, her voice steady. Then she walked out. The door stuck on the way out too. She shouldered it open without breaking stride. Outside, Cole was loading the crate into the wagon. He glanced at her but didn't comment on what had happened inside, just loaded the supplies and climbed into the driver's seat. Mira settled into the wagon bed as Cole snapped the reins. Mountain View fell away behind them, and with it, the last hold it had over her. They were halfway up the mountain road when Cole finally spoke. You did good in there. I insulted him. You told him the truth. That's different. Mira leaned back against a sack of flour, watching the pine trees slide past. I thought I'd feel different, facing him again. I thought I'd feel, I don't know, victorious, maybe. What did you feel? Nothing. Like he didn't matter anymore. Cole was quiet for a moment. That's better than victorious. Is it? Victorious means you're still fighting. Not mattering means you've moved on. He adjusted the reins. You're not that girl on the floor anymore, Mira. You haven't been for a while. The wagon creaked up the mountain road, and Mira watched the sun sink lower in the sky, painting the peaks in gold and shadow. She thought about the cabin waiting for them at the top, the garden she'd planted, the fences she'd mended, the calluses on her hands that proved she'd earned every meal, every night's sleep, every moment of peace. Pike's Mercantile felt like something that had happened to someone else, in another life. When they reached the cabin, the sun had set completely, stars beginning to pierce the darkening sky. Cole unhitched Daisy and carried the supplies inside while Mira built up the fire. They worked in comfortable silence, each knowing their role, moving around each other with the ease of long practice. That night, after a simple dinner of beans and salt pork, they sat by the fire as they always did. Cole whittled a piece of wood into something Mira couldn't yet identify. She mended a tear in one of his work shirts. Cole? She said after a long silence. Yeah? Your wife. What was her name? Cole's knife paused for just a moment, then continued its steady work. Sarah. Would she have minded, me wearing her dress? Cole was quiet for so long Mira thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he set down his whittling and looked at her. No, he said. Sarah would have liked you. Would have liked that you're not afraid of hard work, that you don't give up. He picked up the wood again. She'd want her things used by someone who'd appreciate them. I do appreciate them. I know. They lapsed back into silence, but it felt different now. Fuller, somehow. Mira finished mending the shirt and folded it carefully. Tomorrow they'd start clearing brush from the eastern slope. The day after they'd plant the last rows of the garden. There was always more work, always something that needed doing. But tonight, sitting by the fire in a dress that had belonged to a woman she'd never met, Mira felt something she hadn't felt since leaving China. She felt at home. Spring turned to summer in the mountains, and with it came a heat that baked the rocky slopes and made the air shimmer above the granite cliffs. The garden they'd planted pushed through the soil in neat rows, green shoots that grew taller each day, demanding water and attention and constant vigilance against deer that wandered down from the high country. Mira learned to wake before the sun, to haul water while the morning was still cool enough to make the work bearable. She learned which weeds could be pulled and which had roots so deep they required a spade. She learned to recognize the sound of Daisy's warning bray when predators came too close, and how to fire a shot into the air that sent cougars slinking back into the shadows. The work never stopped, never even slowed. But Mira found she didn't mind. Her body had adapted to the rhythm of mountain life. Up at dawn, work until exhaustion, sleep hard and dreamless. The softness she'd carried from town had burned away, replaced by muscle and endurance that surprised her every time she lifted a full water bucket without strain or split wood for an hour, without needing to rest. Cole watched her progress with his usual silence, offering corrections when she made mistakes and leaving her alone when she got things right. They'd developed a language of gestures and glances that required few words. A nod meant approval. A slight shake of the head meant try again. A hand on her shoulder when she was struggling with a heavy beam meant step aside, let me help. One morning in late June, Mira was working in the garden when she heard Cole curse from somewhere behind the shed. It was so unexpected, he almost never cursed, that she dropped her trowel and ran. She found him sitting on the ground, his left hand cradled against his chest, blood dripping between his fingers. What happened? Axe slipped. Cole's voice was tight with pain. Stupid mistake. Mira knelt beside him. Let me see. It's fine. Cole, let me see. He uncurled his fingers slowly. The cut ran across his palm, deep enough that Mira could see white beneath the red. Not bone, she hoped, but close. We need to clean this, she said, forcing her voice to stay calm. Can you walk? It's my hand, not my leg. Can you walk without passing out? Cole glared at her, but he let her help him to his feet. They made it to the cabin, where Mira sat him down at the table and went for the medical supplies Cole kept in a wooden box under his bed. Bandages, needle and thread, a bottle of whiskey that was more for cleaning wounds than drinking. She poured water from the kettle into a basin and added a splash of whiskey. Cole watched her work, his face pale but composed. You done this before? He asked. No, but I've watched my mother sew up my brother after he fell through a roof. Mira dipped a clean cloth in the whiskey water and wrung it out. This is gonna hurt. Everything hurts. Get on with it. She cleaned the wound as gently as she could, but Cole's jaw went rigid and he gripped the edge of the table with his good hand hard enough to make the wood creak. Blood kept welling up, making it hard to see how deep the cut actually went. I think you need stitches, Mira said. Probably. I've never done stitches. First time for everything. Cole nodded toward the medical box. Thread the needle. Use the silk thread, not the cotton. Mira's hand shook as she threaded the needle. She'd sewn clothes, mended tears in fabric, but this was different. This was skin and blood, and the very real possibility that she'd make things worse. Cole watched her hesitate. You can do this, Mira. Just small stitches, close together. Don't pull too tight, or you'll tear the skin. What if I mess it up? Then I'll have a crooked scar. Won't be my first. He took a deep breath. But you won't mess it up. You're careful. You pay attention. That's all this is. Careful attention. Mira picked up the needle and bent over his hand. The first stitch made her stomach lurch, the needle piercing skin that resisted and then gave way. Cole didn't flinch, but she felt his whole body go tense. Good, he said through clenched teeth. Keep going. She worked slowly, each stitch a small act of concentration that blocked out everything else. The blood, the smell of whiskey, the sound of Cole's controlled breathing. By the time she tied off the last stitch, sweat was running down her back, and her own hands were shaking. Done, she whispered. Cole examined her work, flexing his fingers carefully. The stitches were uneven, some tighter than others, but they held. Not bad for a first try. Mira wrapped his hand in clean bandages, securing them with more care than she'd sewn the stitches. You need to keep this clean. Change the bandages every day. I know. And don't use this hand for anything heavy. At least a week. Cole snorted. Can't run a homestead with one hand. You don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not this time. Mira met his eyes, surprised by her own firmness. You can't work if you get infection. You can't work if you lose the hand, so you rest it, or you risk losing everything. Cole stared at her for a long moment. Then something that might have been respect flickered across his face. "All right," he said quietly. 1 week. That week changed something between them. With Cole unable to do heavy work, Mira had to take on tasks she'd only watched him perform. Splitting the larger logs, repairing a section of roof that had started leaking, hauling supplies from the shed to the cabin. The work pushed her past limits she didn't know she had. Cole tried to help anyway, working one-handed, but Mira caught him struggling with a fence post on the third day and confronted him. "What are you doing?" "What's it look like?" "It looks like you're tearing your stitches." "I'm being careful." "You're being stubborn." Mira took the post from him, ignoring his protest. "Go back to the cabin. I'll finish this." "You can't set a post one-handed either." "Then I'll figure out another way. Like you taught me, patience and problem-solving." She pointed toward the cabin. "Go." Cole's mouth opened to argue, then closed. He walked away without another word, but Mira caught the slight smile he was trying to hide. She did figure out another way, using rocks and rope to brace the post while she tamped down the dirt. It took twice as long as it would have with Cole's help, but when she stepped back and tested it, the post stood solid and plumb. That night, Cole examined her work with his good hand and nodded. "You're learning." "Had a decent teacher." "Teacher's only good as the student." He sat down on the porch steps, looking out at the darkening mountains. "You surprised me, Mira." "How?" "Most people would have left by now. Works too hard, pays too little. I'm not exactly charming company." He glanced at her. "But you stayed, and you got better." Mira sat beside him, her muscles aching in that satisfying way that meant she'd earned her exhaustion. "Where would I go?" "Town. Another city. Find different work." "You mean find a place that would treat me like Pike did?" She shook her head. "At least here, when I'm on my knees in the dirt, it's because I'm planting something that'll grow." Cole was quiet for a moment. "That's a hell of a way to look at it." "It's the only way I know how." They sat in comfortable silence as stars began appearing overhead, more each minute, until the sky was thick with them. Somewhere in the forest, an owl called out, and another answered from farther up the mountain. "My wife used to sit here," Cole said suddenly. "Every night, no matter how tired she was. Said the stars were different in the mountains. Bigger, somehow." It was the most he'd ever said about Sarah. Mira waited, hoping he'd continue. "We came up here together," Cole went on. "Back when this was just empty land and a half-built cabin. She'd wanted to get away from people, same as me. We worked this land side by side for 2 years, built the shed, dug the well, planted that first garden." His voice went rough. "Then she got sick. Something in her lungs. By the time we got down to a doctor, it was too late." "I'm sorry." "You said that before." Cole stood, his movements stiff. "Point is, I've been alone up here a long time. Got used to it. Preferred it even. Then you showed up and..." He trailed off. "And what?" Cole looked at her, his face half shadowed in the dim light from the cabin window. "And it doesn't feel as empty anymore." He went inside before Mira could respond, leaving her alone on the porch with his words hanging in the mountain air. By the end of the week, Cole's hand had healed enough to remove the stitches. Mira did it carefully, snipping each thread and pulling it free while Cole sat motionless. The scar would be permanent, a white line across his palm, but the hand worked fine, all the fingers moving properly. "You did good," Cole said, flexing his hand. "Better than some doctors I've seen. Don't get hurt again, and I won't have to practice." "I'll do my best." They returned to their normal rhythm, but something had shifted. Cole spoke more, offered small observations about the weather or the progress of the garden. Mira found herself responding in kind, sharing memories of her mother's cooking or her brother's mischief that she hadn't thought about in months. One evening, in early July, a storm rolled in from the west, huge thunderheads that turned the sky purple and sent wind howling through the pines. Rain came in sheets, drumming on the cabin roof so loud they had to shout to be heard. Mira stood at the window, watching lightning split the sky over the valley below. She'd seen storms before, but never from this high up, never with this kind of raw power. "First mountain storm?" Cole asked from his chair by the fire. "First one like this. They come fast up here. Usually pass fast, too." He joined her at the window. But this one looks like it might settle in for the night. The storm did settle in, raging for hours. Thunder shook the cabin walls. Rain found every tiny gap in the roof, creating a symphony of drips into strategically placed buckets. The fire guttered in downdrafts from the chimney, sending smoke curling into the room. Around midnight, the wind shifted direction and rain started coming in through the window. Mira had left cracked for air. She rushed to close it, but the frame had swollen and wouldn't budge. Cole came to help, and together they fought the window shut. They stood there, both soaked, water dripping onto the floor, and suddenly Mira started laughing. She couldn't help it, the absurdity of it all, fighting a window in the middle of the night while a storm tried to tear the mountain apart. Cole stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Then, slowly, he started laughing too. Deep, rumbling laughter that sounded rusty from disuse but genuine. "What's funny?" he asked, still chuckling. "I don't know. Everything. Nothing." Mira wiped water from her face. "I crossed an ocean to pick rice off a dirty floor and somehow ended up here, wrestling windows in a thunderstorm. It's insane." "Yeah," Cole agreed. "It is." They looked at each other, both dripping and ridiculous, and Mira felt something warm unfold in her chest. Something that had nothing to do with the fire and everything to do with the man standing across from her. The moment stretched, then broke, when thunder cracked so close it rattled the dishes. "We should get dry," Cole said, stepping back. "Don't need both of us catching cold." Mira changed behind the trunk while Cole stoked the fire back to life. When she emerged in dry clothes, he'd hung their wet things near the hearth and was making tea. They sat drinking it while the storm raged outside, not talking, just sharing the warmth and the quiet between thunder strikes. "Mira," Cole said eventually, "you planning to stay? Long term, I mean." The question caught her off guard. "You want me to leave?" "That's not what I asked." "Then yes. I'm planning to stay, if you'll have me." Cole nodded slowly. "Then we should make some changes. That corner you sleep in, that's not right for permanent. Tomorrow, when the storm clears, I'll start building you a proper room. Nothing fancy, but private. Yours." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." He set down his tea. "And we should talk about wages. $1 a week isn't enough for the work you do." It's what we agreed on." "That was when you were learning. You're not learning anymore. You're working and working hard." Cole pulled out his wallet and counted out bills. $2 a week from now on, plus room and board. "Fair?" Mira stared at the money. $2 a week meant she could start sending money to her brother, could start building something beyond just survival. "Fair," she whispered. Cole handed her the bills. "And one more thing, you need to learn to read better. Your English is good, but reading's different. Winter's coming, and we'll have long nights with nothing to do. Might as well use them teaching you." "Why?" "Because knowledge matters. Because you can't send letters to your brother if you can't write them properly. Because—" He stopped, looking uncomfortable. "Because I'm tired of being the only one who can read the almanac." It wasn't the real reason, Mira knew. But she didn't push. "All right," she said. "Teach me." Over the next month, Cole built Mira's room. A small addition to the cabin, just big enough for a bed and a trunk and a window that looked east toward the sunrise. He worked on it in the evenings, after the day's other work was done, measuring and cutting and fitting boards with the same patient precision he brought to everything. Mira helped when she could, learning the basics of carpentry, but mostly she watched. There was something meditative about the way Cole worked, each piece considered and placed with care. The room was finished in late August. Cole installed the door and stepped back, surveying his work. "It's not much," he said. "It's perfect." And it was. 4 walls that were hers, a space that belonged to her in a way nothing had since she'd left China. Mira ran her hand along the smooth wood of the door frame and felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she said. Cole looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Just needed doing. Can't have you sleeping in the main room forever." That night, Mira slept in her new room for the first time. The bed Cole had built was simple but solid, the mattress stuffed with straw and dried grass that smelled like summer. Through her window, she could see the eastern peaks turning silver in the moonlight. She thought about the last 4 months, about arriving with nothing but a bag of clothes and 22 cents worth of rice, about bleeding hands and aching muscles and endless days of work that never seemed to end, about learning to shoot and plant and build and survive, about Cole, who'd given her a chance when no one else would, about how this rough cabin on a mountainside had become home. The seasons turned. Summer's heat gave way to crisp autumn mornings that painted the aspen groves gold and sent elk bugling in the high meadows. The garden produced more than Mira had expected, potatoes and carrots and beans that they harvested and stored for winter. Cole showed her how to can vegetables, how to smoke meat, how to prepare for the months when snow would close the mountain roads and trap them in isolation. "Winter up here is serious," he explained one evening while they were putting up preserves. "Roads get snowed in sometimes until March. We need enough supplies to last 6 months if we have to." 6 months without going to town? Sometimes longer. 2 years ago, I didn't make it down until April. He sealed another jar and set it on the shelf. "You get cabin fever being stuck in one place that long?" Mira thought about it. 4 months ago, the idea of being trapped on a mountain would have terrified her. Now it just seemed practical. "No," she said. "I don't think so." Cole nodded, something like relief crossing his face. "Good, because I need to make another supply run before the first snow. Big one this time. Enough flour and salt and coffee to last us through spring. That means going to town." Mira's hands stilled on the jar she was filling. She hadn't been back to Mountain View since that day in June. Hadn't thought about Pike or the mercantile or any of it in weeks. "When?" she asked. "Week from tomorrow. We'll take the wagon, load it heavy, maybe stay overnight at the boarding house if we have to." "I'll come." "You sure?" Mira sealed her jar with steady hands. "I'm sure." The week passed in a blur of preparation. They made lists, counted money, calculated exactly what they'd need to survive a hard winter. Cole repaired the wagon and checked Daisy's shoes. Mira mended clothes and packed bags for the journey. The night before they were set to leave, Mira stood at her window watching the first stars appear. Tomorrow she'd face Mountain View again, but this time felt different. She wasn't running from anything, wasn't desperate or hungry or humiliated. She was just a woman going to town for supplies. A knock on her doorframe made her turn. Cole stood there holding something wrapped in cloth. "What's that?" she asked. "Open it." Mira unwrapped the cloth to find a leather journal and a pencil. The journal was new, the pages blank and waiting. "For your letters," Cole said. "To your brother. Figured you'd want to practice before you send the real ones." Mira opened the journal, running her fingers over the smooth paper. "This must have cost—" "Don't worry about what it cost." Cole shifted his weight. "Your brother should know you're all right, that you're safe, that you're—" He trailed off. "That I'm what?" Cole met her eyes. "That you're thriving. Because you are, Mira. Anyone can see that." She wanted to hug him, but something about the way he stood, stiff and uncertain, told her he wouldn't know what to do with that kind of affection. So she just held the journal to her chest and smiled. "I'll write to him tonight," she said. "Good." Cole turned to go, then paused. "Whatever happens tomorrow, in town, you remember you're not the same person who left. You're stronger now, capable. Don't let anyone make you forget that." He left before she could respond. Mira sat at the small table Cole had built for her room and opened the journal. The blank page stared back at her, waiting. She picked up the pencil and began to write, her English letters still awkward but improving. "Dear Way, I am writing from a mountain in California. I know it has been a long time since you heard from me. I'm sorry for that. Things were hard at first, but they are better now. I have work. I have a home. I have enough to eat. Soon I will send money, like I promised. The man I work for is teaching me to read and write better. He is teaching me many things. How to grow food, how to build things, how to survive in a place that seemed impossible at first. I think you would like it here. It is quiet and hard and beautiful. The stars at night are so bright you could read by them. I miss you. I miss Mother. But I'm all right. Better than all right. I'm becoming someone new, and I think you would be proud of her." Mira signed her name and set down the pencil. Tomorrow they'd go to town. She'd face Pike and his mercantile and whatever else Mountain View wanted to throw at her. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, They left before sunrise, the wagon loaded so heavy that Daisy snorted her disapproval when Cole hitched her to it. The mountain road looked different in the pre-dawn darkness, familiar landmarks reduced to shadows and suggestions. Mira sat beside Cole on the driver's seat this time, not hidden in the wagon bed like she'd been on that first journey down. The air smelled like coming snow, though the sky was clear. Cole noticed it too, scanning the northern horizon with a frown. "Weather's changing," he said. "We'll need to make this quick." "How quick?" "Get supplies and get out. No lingering." He glanced at her. "That work for you?" Mira nodded. The less time in Mountain View, the better. The sun rose as they descended, turning the valley below from black to gray to gold. By the time they reached the outskirts of town, full morning had arrived and Mountain View was stirring to life. Smoke rose from chimneys. A few early risers moved along the main street. Everything looked smaller than Mira remembered, more ordinary. Cole pulled the wagon to a stop in front of Pike's Mercantile. The door still stuck. Through the window, Mira could see Pike already behind his counter, probably had been since dawn. "You ready?" Cole asked. "Yes." They climbed down together. Cole grabbed 2 empty crates from the wagon bed and handed one to Mira. "We'll fill these first, then see what else we need." The door protested when Cole shouldered it open. Pike looked up from his ledger, and for a moment, just a flash, something that might have been apprehension crossed his face. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual merchant's mask. "Cole. Mira." He said both names with careful neutrality. "Big order today." "Winter supplies," Cole said, pulling out his list. "Going to need a lot." Pike took the list and scanned it, his eyebrows climbing. This is a 6-month order." "That's right." "Roads might not close that long." "Might not, but if they do, I plan to be ready." Cole set his crate on the counter. "Can you fill it or not?" Pike's jaw worked. "I can fill it. Going to take some time, though. Maybe an hour." "We'll wait." Pike nodded and started gathering supplies from the shelves. Mira wandered deeper into the store, her boots solid on the floorboards. The place felt different now, less intimidating. Just a store. Just wood and goods, and a man who'd gotten smaller in her absence. The woman in the blue dress was there again, examining fabric near the window. She looked up when Mira passed, and recognition flickered in her eyes. But this time she didn't say anything, just nodded slightly and returned to her shopping. Mira selected a spool of thread from a display and brought it to the counter. Pike was weighing flour, his movements mechanical and precise. "I'll take this too," Mira said, setting down the thread. Pike glanced at it. 10 cents. She counted out the coins and placed them on the counter. Pike swept them into his till without comment. Cole returned from examining the ammunition selection. "You still carry that salve? The pine tar one?" "Same as always." "Give me 3 tins." Pike pulled the tins from a shelf and added them to the growing pile of supplies. The silence in the store was broken only by the sound of goods being stacked and measured. Mira watched Pike work, noting how he kept his distance from her, how he wouldn't quite meet her eyes. A new customer entered, a young man Mira didn't recognize, dressed in work clothes that had seen better days. He nodded to Pike and started browsing the tool section. "Help you find something?" Pike called out. "Just looking." Pike returned to Cole's order, pulling down sacks of beans and rice. When he got to the rice, he paused, just for a second, then scooped it out with exaggerated care and weighed it twice before bagging it. 20 pounds of rice, all of it properly measured and bagged. It took Pike 40 minutes to fill the entire order. He stacked everything on the counter and tallied it up on a piece of paper, his pencil scratching numbers in careful columns. "That comes to $32.75, he announced. Cole counted out bills, mostly 5s and 10s, plus some 1s and loose change. He laid it all on the counter in neat stacks. Pike counted it carefully, then recounted it. $32.75. He opened his till to make change for the last bill. "You've got $2.25 coming back." He counted it out. $2 bills, 2 dimes, and a nickel. Set them on the counter. Cole scooped up the change without checking it and pocketed it. Then he and Mira started loading supplies into their crates. The work went quickly, both of them moving with the efficiency of long practice. They were almost done when Pike cleared his throat. "Mira." he said. She looked up, surprised he'd addressed her directly. Pike's hands rested on the counter, his fingers drumming an uncertain rhythm. You look well. Thank you. Mountain life seems to agree with you. Mira waited, sensing there was more. Pike glanced at Cole, then back to her. I wanted to say, that is, about what happened before. It's done, Mira said quietly. It's in the past. Still, it wasn't right. How I treated you. Pike's face reddened. You didn't deserve that. The apology hung in the air between them. The young man browsing tools had gone still, pretending not to listen. The woman in the blue dress had abandoned all pretense of shopping. Mira could have said many things, could have thrown Pike's cruelty back in his face, could have made him feel as small as he'd made her feel. Part of her wanted to. But standing there in her sturdy boots and clean dress, with calloused hands and a strength that went bone deep, Mira found she didn't need to. I appreciate that, she said simply. Pike nodded, relief evident on his face. If you ever need anything, if Cole's order isn't right, or if you need credit, we'll pay cash, Cole interrupted, his voice flat. Same as always. The moment broke. Pike returned to his ledger, and Cole hefted his loaded crate. Mira picked up hers, heavy with flour and coffee and beans, and followed Cole toward the door. They were loading the wagon when the woman in the blue dress emerged from the mercantile. She approached hesitantly, clutching a package to her chest. Excuse me, she said. Mira, is it? Mira set down her crate. Yes. I'm Margaret Winters. I don't think we were properly introduced before. She shifted her weight. I wanted to apologize for what I said, about going off with a strange man. It was presumptuous and rude. You were concerned, Mira said. That's different than cruel. Margaret smiled slightly. Kind of you to say so, but still, I'm sorry. She glanced at Cole, who was securing crates in the wagon bed. Seems you made the right choice after all. I did. If you're ever in town and need anything, a place to rest, a meal, someone to talk to, my husband and I run the bakery on 2nd Street. You're welcome anytime. It was more than Mira had expected, more than she'd hoped for. Thank you, Mrs. Winters. Margaret, please. She touched Mira's arm briefly. Take care of yourself up there. She walked away before Mira could respond, disappearing around the corner toward 2nd Street. Cole finished securing the load and climbed into the driver's seat. Mira joined him, settling onto the worn wood that had become familiar over the months. That went better than last time, Cole observed. Much better. Pike apologized. That surprise you? Mira thought about it. A little. I didn't think he had it in him. People can surprise you sometimes, usually for the worse, but occasionally for the better. Cole gathered the reins. We've got everything we need, should head back before that weather moves in. But as he was about to snap the reins, a voice called out from across the street. Cole Mercer, hold up! An older man was crossing toward them, moving with the careful gait of someone whose joints didn't work as well as they used to. He wore a sheriff's badge on his vest, though it was tarnished enough to suggest the position didn't come with much authority or pay. Sheriff Hayes, Cole said, his voice guarded. Problem? Hayes reached the wagon, breathing hard. No problem, just wanted a word. He glanced at Mira. This the girl who's been living up at your place? Her name's Mira Chen. She works for me. Mira. Hayes tipped his hat. Sheriff Tom Hayes. I keep the peace around here, such as it is. He turned back to Cole. Had a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind. About what? About that section of land north of your property, the old Jensen place. Hayes pulled out a folded paper from his pocket. County's finally settled the estate. They're looking to sell it off. Thought you might be interested. Cole's expression didn't change, but Mira felt him go still beside her. How much land? He asked. About 40 acres. Borders your northern fence line, runs up to the ridge. Hayes unfolded the paper. It's rough country, not much good for farming, but it's got water rights to Miller Creek, and the timber's decent if you wanted to log it. What are they asking? $120? Cole was quiet for a long moment. That's a lot of money. It is, but it's good land, and it'd keep anyone from building too close to you. Hayes folded the paper back up. They're taking sealed bids through the end of the month. Figured you should know, seeing as you're the closest neighbor. I appreciate that, Tom. You going to bid? Cole glanced at Mira and she saw something in his eyes she couldn't quite read. Calculation, maybe. Or possibility. I'll think about it, he said. Hayes nodded and handed Cole the paper. Details are all there. Let me know if you have questions. He tipped his hat to Mira again. Miss Chen, you take care. He walked away, leaving Cole holding the paper and staring at nothing in particular. Is 40 acres a lot? Mira asked. It's enough to double what I've got now. Cole folded the paper and tucked it into his coat. Come on, we should get moving. They left Mountain View behind for the second time, the wagon groaning under its heavy load. The road climbed steadily, and Daisy settled into her patient plod. Neither of them spoke for the first hour, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Mira broke the silence. Are you going to bid on that land? Don't know. $120 is more than I've got saved. How much do you have? Cole shot her a look. That's a personal question. We're living on the same mountain. Seems like my business, too. He grunted, which might have been agreement. About $80. Maybe 90 if I count what I've got in the coffee tin. So you're short. By a fair amount, yeah. Mira did the math in her head. I've saved $14 from my wages. You could have that. Cole's hands tightened on the reins. No. Why not? Because that's your money. For your brother, for your future. I'm not taking it. But if the land would help, Mira, Cole's voice was firm. I appreciate the offer, but no. You worked for that money. It's yours. They rode in silence for another mile. The sky had grown darker, clouds building over the northern peaks exactly like Cole had predicted. The wind picked up, carrying the sharp smell of coming snow. What if we were partners? Mira said suddenly. Cole pulled back on the reins, bringing Daisy to a stop. He turned to look at Mira fully. What? Partners. In the land. I put in my $14. You put in your 80 or 90. We pool our money and make a bid. That still doesn't get us to 120. No, but it gets us close, and maybe... Mira hesitated, working through the idea as she spoke. Maybe we could offer to pay the rest over time, or trade labor, or find another way. Cole stared at her. You want to be partners in land ownership. Why not? Because you're 18 years old and you've been in this country less than a year. Because you should be saving that money for something better than a piece of rough mountain that probably won't be worth half what we pay for it. He shook his head. It's a bad investment, Mira. Then why do you want it? The question hung between them. Cole looked away toward the mountains rising ahead. Because it's mine, he said quietly. Because I've been living on this mountain for 9 years, and I'm tired of worrying that someone's going to build too close, or start logging the timber, or dam the creek, because I want... He trailed off. What do you want? Cole met her eyes. I want to know that the place I've built, that we've built, is secure, that it can't be taken away. Mira understood that feeling, the need for something solid and permanent, something that couldn't be destroyed by cruelty or circumstance. Then let's make it secure, she said, together. You don't know what you're offering. I know exactly what I'm offering. I'm offering to invest in the only place that's ever felt like home. Mira kept her voice steady. You gave me a chance when no one else would. Let me give something back. Cole searched her face, looking for doubt or uncertainty. Mira kept her gaze level, refusing to look away. Partners, Cole said finally. Not employer and employee. Actual partners. Equal stake in the land. That's not fair. You're putting in more money. And you're putting in years of work to come. That's worth more than money. Cole held out his hand. Equal partners. Yes or no? Mira looked at his outstretched hand, scarred and calloused, the palm marked with the white line where she'd stitched it back together. She thought about all the hands that had touched hers in the past year. The immigration officer who'd stamped her papers with barely a glance. The labor brokers who'd sized her up like livestock. Pike, who'd never touched her at all, just let rice spill through his fingers onto filthy floor. And Cole, who'd offered steady work and fair treatment and the chance to build something real. She took his hand. Partners. They shook on it, and something shifted in the air between them. Not quite romance, not quite friendship, something newer and more complicated. A commitment that went beyond wages and work. Cole released her hand and snapped the reins. Daisy started forward again, pulling their heavy load up the mountain road. "We'll need to work out the bid," Cole said, falling into planning mode. "Figure out exactly what we can offer and how we'll structure it. I know a land agent in Placerville who might help us with the paperwork. When do we need to submit it?" "End of the month. 3 weeks." He glanced at the darkening sky. "But first we need to get home before this storm hits." The wind was picking up now, bending the pines and sending dead leaves skittering across the road. The temperature dropped noticeably, and Mira pulled her shawl tighter. They were still 2 hours from the cabin when the first snowflakes began to fall. "Damn," Cole muttered. "Earlier than I thought." The snow came light at first, just scattered flakes that melted as soon as they touched the ground. But within 20 minutes, it was falling steadily, accumulating on the road and making the wagon wheels slip on the steeper sections. Cole kept Daisy moving at a steady pace, not pushing her but not slowing down either. The visibility dropped as the snow intensified, reducing the world to a white curtain that made it hard to see more than 50 feet ahead. "How much farther?" Mira asked, raising her voice over the wind. "Hour and a half. Maybe less if the road doesn't get too bad." It got bad. The snow piled up faster than Mira would have thought possible, covering the wagon ruts and making the road nearly indistinguishable from the forest floor. Cole navigated by memory and instinct, reading landmarks that Mira couldn't see through the white haze. Twice they had to stop to clear snow from in front of the wagon. Mira's hands went numb even through her gloves. Her feet felt like blocks of ice in her boots. But she didn't complain, just worked alongside Cole to move the snow and keep them moving forward. When the cabin finally appeared through the storm, Mira felt a rush of relief so strong it made her dizzy. Home. They'd made it home. Cole pulled the wagon as close to the porch as he could. "We'll unload what we need for tonight and do the rest tomorrow. No point freezing to death over flour." They grabbed the essentials, food, coffee, the medical supplies, and hauled them inside. Cole got the fire going while Mira lit lamps, both of them moving on instinct, too cold to think clearly. When the cabin had warmed enough for her fingers to stop aching, Mira looked at Cole. He was standing by the fire, his coat and hat crusted with snow, his beard white with ice. "We made it," she said. "Barely." But there was a smile in his voice. That's the thing about mountain living. Barely counts as a success. They ate a cold dinner of bread and cheese, too tired to cook anything more complicated. Outside, the storm raged on, piling snow against the cabin walls and turning the world into a white void. "First snow of the season," Cole said, watching it through the window. "Won't be the last. Winter's really coming now." Mira thought about the months ahead, about being snowed in with Cole, just the two of them in this small cabin, about the land they'd agreed to bid on together, about the commitment they'd made to each other, standing on a mountain road while snow began to fall. "Cole," she said, "when I first came here, you said I'd earn my keep, that I'd prove I could handle the work. You did prove it, proved it 100 times over. So I'm not on trial anymore. I'm not temporary." Cole looked at her, firelight catching in his gray eyes. "No, you're not temporary." "Then I need you to hear something." Mira set down her bread. "This place, what we're building, it matters to me. Not just as a job or a place to live. It matters. I know that. Do you? Because sometimes I think you still see me as the girl you found in Pike's store, the one who needed saving." Cole frowned. "That's not... Let me finish." Mira stood, moving to the window. "I'm not that girl anymore. I'm stronger now, capable, like you said, and I'm choosing to stay. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because this is where I want to be." She turned to face him. "So when we bid on that land, when we become partners, I need you to know it's not out of gratitude or obligation. It's because I believe in what we're doing, in what we could do." Cole was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the crackle of the fire and the wind howling outside. "I know," he said finally. "I've known for a while now." "Known what?" "That you stayed because you wanted to. That you're here because you choose to be. He stood and walked to stand beside her at the window. You want the truth? I'm grateful for it. More grateful than I know how to say. They stood side by side, watching the snow fall in the darkness beyond the glass. Tomorrow they'd dig out the wagon and finish unloading supplies. They'd start planning their bid for the Jensen land. They'd begin preparing for a winter that would test every skill they'd built. But tonight, standing in the warm cabin with the storm raging outside, Mira felt something settle deep in her chest, a certainty she hadn't known she was looking for. This was home. Not because it was easy or comfortable or safe, but because she'd earned every inch of it. Every board in the walls, every stone in the hearth, every moment of peace. And when spring came and the snow melted and they found out whether their bid had been accepted, Mira knew she'd still be here. Still working, still building, still choosing this life and this mountain and the quiet man who'd given her a chance to become someone new. We should sleep, Cole said. Long day tomorrow. Long winter, Mira corrected. Cole smiled. That too. They banked the fire and retreated to their separate rooms. Mira lay in the bed Cole had built for her, listening to the storm and thinking about everything that had changed since that first desperate day in Pike's Mercantile. She'd knelt on a dirty floor and picked up rice because she had no other choice. Now she stood tall in her own room, in her own home, with calloused hands and a partnership in land she'd helped choose. The journey between those two moments had been harder than anything Mira could have imagined. But as she drifted off to sleep, warm and fed and safe from the storm, she wouldn't have changed a single step of it. The storm lasted 3 days, burying the cabin under 4 feet of snow and turning the world into a white silence broken only by wind and the occasional crack of a tree branch giving way under the weight. Mira and Cole worked together to keep the paths clear, from cabin to shed, shed to well to the woodpile. They fell into a rhythm born of necessity, each anticipating what the other needed before words became necessary. On the 4th morning, Mira woke to stillness. No wind battering the walls, no snow pelting the windows, just profound quiet. She dressed quickly and emerged from her room to find Cole already at the window, coffee in hand, staring out at a landscape transformed. The sun was rising over the eastern peaks, turning the snow into a field of diamonds that hurt to look at directly. It stopped, Mira said unnecessarily. About 2 hours ago. Cole handed her a cup of coffee. We should dig out the wagon today, and I need to check the fences. Snow this heavy can bring whole sections down. They spent the morning shoveling, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The wagon was buried to its axles, and Daisy had worn a path in her corral from pacing. When they finally freed the wagon and finished unloading the supplies they'd left in it, Mira's shoulders ached and her hands were raw despite her gloves. That afternoon, while Cole checked the southern fence line, Mira sat at the table with the paper Sheriff Hayes had given them. She spread it out carefully, studying the description of the Jensen property with her improving English. 40 acres. Water rights to Miller Creek. Timber suitable for selective logging. Rocky soil, not ideal for farming. The land was described in legal terms that made her head hurt, but she could piece together the important parts. Cole returned as the sun was setting, stamping snow from his boots on the porch. South fence is fine. I'll check the north tomorrow. I've been reading about the Jensen land, Mira said. Cole poured himself coffee and sat across from her. And? The bid deadline is in 2 weeks. We need to submit a sealed offer to the county office in Placerville. She traced the text with her finger. It says here they'll accept payment plans if the initial deposit is at least 30%. Cole leaned forward. 30% of 120 is $36. We have close to 100 between us. We could offer $40 down and propose paying the rest over 2 years. That's risky. What if we have a bad harvest? What if one of us gets hurt and can't work? What if we don't try? Mira met his eyes. You said yourself you want the land secure. This is how we do it. Cole ran his hand through his beard, thinking. We'd need to make the trip to Placerville. Submit the bid in person. That's a full day's journey, and the roads are going to be bad after this snow. Can we make it? Maybe, if we leave in the next few days before another storm hits. He looked at the paper again. All right, we'll do it. But we need to write this proposal carefully, make it look professional. They spent the next 2 days crafting their bid. Cole had a steadier hand for writing, but Mira helped with the wording, making sure every sentence was clear and persuasive. They outlined their plan, $40 down, with the remaining $80 to be paid in quarterly installments over 2 years. They included references, Sheriff Hayes, who could vouch for Cole's character, and even Pike, whose grudging approval might carry weight with the county. "Think it's enough?" Mira asked when they'd finished the final draft. "Only one way to find out." They left for Placerville on a clear, cold morning, the wagon lighter now but the roads treacherous with ice. The journey took longer than Cole had estimated, 8 hours instead of 6, and by the time they reached Placerville, a town twice the size of Mountain View, the county office was closed for the day. "We'll have to stay the night," Cole said, pulling up in front of a modest hotel. "Submit the bid first thing in the morning." The hotel was clean but spare, and the clerk eyed them with curiosity when Cole asked for 2 rooms. "We're business partners," Cole explained, his voice flat in a way that discouraged questions. The clerk handed over 2 keys without comment. Mira's room was small, just a bed and a washstand, but it felt luxurious after months of mountain living. She washed her face and changed into her cleanest dress, the gray one that had been Sarah's, before meeting Cole downstairs for dinner. The hotel restaurant was half full, mostly men in work clothes, a few families. Cole and Mira sat in a corner booth, and for the first time since they'd met, Mira felt self-conscious about being seen with him. Not because she was ashamed, but because she wondered what people saw when they looked at them together. An older white man and a young Chinese woman. Employer and employee? Something else? If Cole noticed her discomfort, he didn't mention it. He ordered stew for both of them and focused on the practicalities. "Tomorrow we submit the bid. Then we wait. Could be a week before we hear anything. Could be a month. And if someone else bids higher, then we lose the land and keep our money." Cole tore off a piece of bread. "But I don't think there'll be much competition. It's rough country, like the description said. Not many people want it. Except us." "Except us," Cole agreed. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind they'd developed over months of shared meals. When the check came, Cole paid, waving off Mira's attempt to contribute. "Save your money. You'll need it if this bid goes through." Back in her room, Mira lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow they'd submit their bid and start a process that could change everything. If they got the land, she'd own property in America. Not just live on it, not just work it, but own it. The thought was so large she couldn't quite fit it in her head. She thought about her brother Wei, still in Guangdong province, probably working the same small plot of land their family had farmed for generations. She thought about the money she'd saved, the letter she'd written but not yet sent. Soon, she promised herself. Soon she'd send it all. The money and the letter and proof that the journey hadn't been for nothing. Morning came gray and cold. Mira dressed carefully, braiding her hair and checking her reflection twice before heading downstairs. Cole was already waiting, the bid proposal in a sealed envelope, his expression unreadable. They walked to the county office through streets still crusted with old snow. The building was brick and imposing, with a flag hanging limp in the still air. Inside, a clerk directed them to the land office on the 2nd floor. The land agent was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and ink-stained fingers. He looked up when they entered, his gaze flicking between Cole and Mira with barely concealed curiosity. "Help you?" he asked. Cole set the envelope on the desk. "We're here to submit a bid on the Jensen property, the 40 acres north of Mountain View." The agent opened the envelope and read their proposal carefully, his expression neutral. When he finished, he set it aside and pulled out a ledger. "You're the first bid we've received," he said, "though we've had 2 inquiries." "When will you make a decision?" Cole asked. "We'll open all sealed bids on the 30th and award the property to the highest qualified bidder. You'll receive notice by mail within a week after that." The agent made a note in his ledger. "Your proposal appears complete. Is this a partnership arrangement?" "Yes," Mira said, speaking for the first time. "Equal partners." The agent's eyebrows rose slightly, but he just nodded and made another note. "You'll need to file formal partnership papers if your bid is accepted. There's a lawyer on First Street who can help with that." "We'll handle it," Cole said. The agent stamped their proposal with an official seal and filed it in a drawer. "That's all we need from you. You'll hear from us one way or another by mid-November." They left the office and stood on the street, the enormity of what they'd just done settling over them. "That's it?" Mira asked. "That's it. Now we wait." The journey back to the mountain felt longer, weighted with anticipation and uncertainty. They didn't talk much, both lost in their own thoughts. When the cabin finally came into view, snow-covered and solid against the darkening sky, Mira felt relief wash through her. Whatever happened with the bid, this place was home. The weeks that followed fell into winter's pattern. Snow came and went. Cole taught Mira to read by lamplight, using an old almanac and whatever newspapers he'd saved from previous trips to town. Her English improved steadily, though she still struggled with certain words and her accent remained thick. One evening in late November, as they sat by the fire with Mira reading aloud from the almanac, Cole interrupted her. "You're doing it wrong." Mira looked up. "What?" "That word. Drought. You're saying it like draft. They're spelled almost the same. English is stupid that way. Here, drought, like out. Not draft, like awful." Mira repeated it correctly, and Cole nodded his approval. She returned to reading, but after a few minutes, she set down the almanac. "Cole, can I ask you something? You're going to anyway. Why did you really help me? That first day in Pike's store, the real reason." Cole was quiet for so long Mira thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down the piece of wood he'd been whittling. "My wife, Sarah, she came from nothing. Her family was poor, poorer than most. When we met, she was working as a housemaid for a family that treated her like dirt." He stared into the fire. "I saw her cry once because they made her eat her meals standing in the kitchen. Said she wasn't good enough to sit at their table." "That's terrible." "It was. And I watched it happen and did nothing for months because I was a coward who didn't want to lose his job working their stable." Cole's voice went rough. "By the time I worked up the courage to ask her to leave with me, she was so beaten down she could barely remember what it felt like to stand up straight." Mira waited, sensing there was more. It took years for her to believe she deserved better. Years for her to walk into a room without apologizing for taking up space. Cole looked at Mira. "When I saw you on that floor, picking up rice while Pike stood there smiling, I saw Sarah, saw what she'd been, and I couldn't walk away again." "So you were making up for not helping her sooner?" "Maybe. Or maybe I just couldn't stand watching another person get broken by cruelty when I had the power to stop it." He picked up his whittling again. "Either way, I'm glad I did it. You turned out to be worth the trouble." Mira smiled. "High praise. Don't let it go to your head." They lapsed back into comfortable silence, and Mira returned to her reading. But something had shifted again, another layer of understanding added to the foundation they were building together. The letter from the county office arrived on December 3rd, brought by a mail carrier who made the trip up the mountain specifically to deliver it. Cole signed for it with hands that weren't quite steady. Mira stood beside him on the porch, holding her breath. Cole opened the envelope slowly, unfolding the single sheet of paper inside. His eyes scanned the text once, then again. His expression didn't change. "Well?" Mira asked, unable to stand the suspense. Cole looked at her, and slowly, so slowly she almost missed it, he smiled. "We got it." Mira's knees went weak. "We got the land? Says here our bid was accepted. We need to come to Placerville within 2 weeks to sign the papers and make our initial payment." He read further. "They accepted our payment plan. $80 over 2 years, paid quarterly." Mira grabbed his arm, needing something solid to hold on to. "We own land." "We will, once we sign." Cole folded the letter carefully. "This is real, Mira. This is actually happening." They stood on the porch in the cold December air, both too stunned to move. Then Mira started laughing, the same helpless laughter that had overtaken her during the thunderstorm. Cole joined in, and they stood there like fools, laughing at the impossible thing they'd somehow made possible. They made the trip to Placerville the following week, bringing their $40 and whatever documentation the lawyer on First Street required. The partnership papers were drawn up, official and binding. Mira Chen and Cole Mercer, equal partners in 80 acres of California mountain land. When they signed their names, Mira's signature still shaky but legible, the lawyer stamped the documents and handed them copies. "Congratulations," he said. "You're landowners." Walking out of that office, papers in hand, Mira felt different, taller somehow, more substantial. She owned land in America. She'd gone from picking rice off a dirty floor to owning 80 acres of mountain in less than a year. The impossibility of it made her dizzy. That night, back in the cabin, they celebrated with a dinner that was only slightly fancier than usual. Venison steaks instead of stew, canned peaches for dessert. Cole even broke out a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving for something special. "To partnerships," he said, raising his glass. "To home," Mira countered. They drank, and the whiskey burned warm down Mira's throat, settling like fire in her stomach. "I'm going to write to my brother," she said. "Tell him about the land. Send him the money I've saved." Cole nodded. "How much are you sending?" "All of it. $14. It's not as much as I wanted, but it's something." "It's more than something. It's proof you kept your promise." Cole refilled his glass. "You should be proud." Mira thought about that. Pride had always felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. But sitting here, in a cabin she'd helped maintain, on land she now partially owned, having sent money to the brother who'd cried when she left, maybe pride was exactly what she should feel. "I am proud," she said quietly, "of all of it." Winter deepened, bringing storms that made the first one look gentle. But Mira and Cole were prepared, their stores full, their cabin tight against the wind. They passed the long, dark evenings reading and talking and planning what they'd do with the new land come spring. "We could expand the garden," Cole suggested one night. "The Jensen property has that flat section near the creek, better soil than what we've got here." "Or we could build a proper barn," Mira countered. "Get more animals, maybe a cow for milk." Getting ambitious. "You're the one who wanted the land. Might as well use it." Cole smiled. "Fair point." Christmas came and went quietly. Mira had never celebrated it before, but Cole explained the tradition and they made what observance they could. A slightly nicer dinner, a small gift exchange. Cole gave Mira a new winter coat he'd ordered months ago from a catalog. Mira gave Cole a shirt she'd sewn herself, carefully fitted to his measurements. "This is too much," Cole said, examining the coat. "Must have cost a fortune." "Partners invest in each other," Mira said. "Besides, I couldn't have you freezing to death before we finish paying for the land." "Practical as always." "Someone has to be." January brought news from China. Mira's letter reached her brother, and he wrote back. A brief note, his handwriting barely legible, thanking her for the money and telling her how much he missed her. He'd used some of it to repair their house. The rest he'd saved for lean times. Mira read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and placed it in her trunk. The distance between them felt both vast and somehow smaller. She was building a life here, but she hadn't forgotten where she came from. February was brutal, the coldest month Mira had ever experienced. The well nearly froze. The chickens they'd acquired in the fall huddled together for warmth. But the cabin held strong, and so did they. One morning, Mira woke to find Cole standing at the window in the main room, staring out at something. "What is it?" she asked. "Come see." She joined him at the window. There, barely visible against the snow, was a wild rosebush that grew near the eastern corner of the cabin. It had been bare and dormant all winter, just thorny branches that looked dead. But now, impossibly, there was a bud. Just one, still tightly closed, but unmistakably alive. "It's too early," Cole said. "Roses don't bloom until April, at least." "Maybe it knows something we don't." They watched the bud for days, checking on it every morning. Slowly, stubbornly, it began to open despite the cold. By the end of the week, it was a full flower, pale pink, fragile, absolutely determined to exist. "Sarah planted that," Cole said one evening. "Her first spring here. Said every home needed something beautiful, not just practical." Mira looked at him. She was right. She usually was. Cole was quiet for a moment. "She would have liked you, Mira. Would have liked the person you've become." "The person you helped me become." "No. The person you chose to become. There's a difference." March arrived, bringing the first hints of thaw. The snow began to recede, revealing brown earth and the promise of spring. Cole and Mira started planning in earnest. What to plant, what to build, how to make the most of their expanded land. One afternoon, while they were walking the boundary of the Jensen property, marking where they'd put new fences, Cole stopped suddenly. Mira, I need to tell you something. The seriousness in his voice made her nervous. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. He struggled for words. When you first came here, I told myself it was temporary, that you'd stay a few months, earn some money, then move on to something better. Someplace that actually had people and opportunity. I remember. But you didn't leave. And somewhere along the way, this stopped being my cabin and my land and my life. He met her eyes. It became ours. And I realized I don't want you to be just my partner in property. I want... Cole, Mira interrupted gently. I know. You know what? I know what you're trying to say. And I feel it too. She took a breath. But we don't need to name it yet. We don't need to make it complicated. Can't it just be what it is? Cole studied her face. And what is it? It's two people who chose each other, who built something together, who trust each other enough to bet their futures on a piece of mountain land. Mira smiled. That's already more than most people get. So we just keep going? We keep going. Let it grow at its own pace, like that rose bush, blooming when it's ready, not when we think it should. Cole nodded slowly, relief and something else, maybe gratitude, crossing his face. I can work with that. They walked back to the cabin as the sun set behind the western peaks, painting everything gold and shadow. The wild rose was still blooming, defying the cold, proving that beautiful things could exist even in harsh places. That night, Mira sat at her table and pulled out her journal. She'd written several letters to Wei over the winter, but this one felt different, more important somehow. Dear Wei, I'm writing to tell you that I own land now, 40 acres of it, shared equally with my partner. The papers are signed and legal. I have proof. It's not easy land. It's rocky and steep, and the winters are brutal. But it's mine. Ours. And we're making it into something. I've learned so much here. How to work until my hands bleed and keep working. How to fix what's broken and build what's needed. How to stand up for myself without cruelty. How to forgive without forgetting. I'm not the same person who left Guangdong province. I'm stronger now. Harder in some ways, softer in others. I can shoot a gun and sew a wound and read English well enough to understand legal documents. But more than that, I know my worth now. I know I deserve respect and dignity and a place to call home. Pike's Mercantile taught me what I could endure. This mountain taught me what I could become. I hope you're well. I hope the money I sent helped. I'll send more when I can, but right now we're investing everything in the land. In the future we're building. I think Mother would be proud. Not of the land or the money, but of the fact that I didn't give up, that I kept going even when it was hard. Take care of yourself, little brother, and know that even though I'm an ocean away, you're still in my heart. Your sister Mira. She sealed the letter and set it aside to mail on their next trip to town. Then she blew out her lamp and lay in bed, listening to the quiet sounds of the cabin settling, of Cole moving around in the main room, of wind moving through the pines. Spring came slowly, tentatively, like the mountain wasn't quite ready to let winter go. But it came. The snow melted into rushing creeks. Birds returned from wherever they'd spent the cold months. The garden plot thawed enough to work. Cole and Mira began the cycle again, planting, mending, building, but this time with the knowledge that every seed they planted, every fence post they set, was going into land they owned, land that couldn't be taken away. One morning in early April, Sheriff Hayes made the trip up to the cabin. Mira saw him coming and felt a flutter of anxiety. Visits from the law were rarely good news. But Hayes dismounted with a smile and tipped his hat to both of them. Just wanted to check on you folks. See how you're settling into the new property. We're settling fine, Cole said. Something we can help you with, Tom? Actually, yes. Hayes pulled out a folded newspaper. Thought you might want to see this. Cole took the paper and unfolded it. It was the Mountain View Gazette, such as it was, 4 pages of local news and advertisements. Hayes had circled one article in pencil. Mira read over Cole's shoulder. The article was about the county's land auction. It mentioned that the Jensen property had been sold to local residents Cole Mercer and Mira Chen, who operate a successful homestead north of town. Successful homestead, local residents, not immigrant, not foreigner, not outsider, local resident. Thought you'd appreciate that, Hayes said. Town's talking about it. Most folks are impressed that you two managed it. That's not easy land to work. We're managing, Cole said, his voice carefully neutral. I can see that. Hayes glanced around at the well-maintained cabin, the orderly woodpile, the neat fences. You've done good work up here, both of you. He mounted his horse. Keep it up, and if you need anything from town, you let me know. He rode away, leaving Cole and Mira standing with the newspaper. Local residents, Mira said softly. That's what it says. She looked at Cole. Is that what I am now? A local resident? I think you've been one for a while. Just took the town some time to notice. They went back to their work, but the newspaper stayed on the table, that phrase circled in pencil. Mira found herself looking at it throughout the day, testing how it felt. Local resident. Someone who belonged. That afternoon, while Mira was working in the garden, she heard Cole call her name. She straightened, brushing dirt from her hands, and walked to where he stood near the rosebush. The plant had fully leafed out now, green and healthy, with several new buds forming. Look at this, Cole said, pointing. There, tucked among the thorny branches, was a bird's nest, small and carefully woven with 3 speckled eggs nestled inside. We should move it, Mira said, so we don't disturb them. Can't move a nest once it's built. The birds won't come back. Cole stepped away carefully. We'll just have to work around them. For the next few weeks, they gave the rose bush a wide berth, watching as the eggs hatched and tiny birds emerged, mouths always open, always demanding. The mother bird grew used to their presence, eventually feeding her young even when Cole and Mira were working nearby. It felt symbolic somehow, though Mira couldn't quite articulate how. Life taking root in thorny places, new growth emerging from what looked barren, the patient work of building something that would last. One evening in late May, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over their 80 acres, Mira spoke. Cole, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been in Pike's store that day? Sometimes. Where do you think I'd be? Cole was quiet for a moment. I don't know. Maybe you'd have found work somewhere else. Maybe you'd have made it on your own. Or maybe I'd have given up and gone back to China. You're not a quitter, Mira. You'd have found a way. Maybe. She pulled her knees to her chest. But I'm glad I found this way. With you. Here. Cole looked at her, the setting sun turning his gray eyes almost gold. So am I. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness gathered, watching the first stars appear. The baby birds in the rose bush chirped softly, settling in for the night. Somewhere down the mountain, a coyote called out, and another answered. You know what I realized today? Mira said. What? I haven't thought about Pike's Mercantile in months. Haven't thought about that day, about kneeling on the floor. It just doesn't matter anymore. That's good. It is. Mira stood, stretching. Because if I still carried that shame, that anger, I couldn't be here. Couldn't appreciate this. She gestured at the cabin, the land, the mountains rising dark against the star-filled sky. Can't build something new if you're still trapped in something old. Cole stood beside her. You've gotten wise, you know that? Or just less scared. Same thing, maybe. They went inside and Mira built up the fire while Cole checked the windows and doors, both moving through their evening routine with the ease of long practice. When everything was secure and the fire was crackling properly, they sat at the table with tea, neither quite ready for bed. I've been thinking about next year, Cole said. About what else we could do with the land. And? There's a stand of timber on the Jensen property that's mature enough to harvest. We could do selective logging, take some trees, leave others. Sell the lumber in Placerville. That's a lot of work. It is. But it's money we could use to pay off the land faster. Maybe even have enough left over to invest in that cow you wanted. He looked at her. What do you think? I think you're already planning it, so you don't really need my opinion. Cole smiled. Your opinion matters. Then yes, let's do it. More work never killed anyone. Might kill me. You're too stubborn to die. That's true. They planned late into the night which trees to cut, when to do it, how to transport the lumber down the mountain. It was practical talk, boring to anyone who might overhear, but Mira loved it. Loved the careful consideration, the weighing of options, the partnership of it all. This was what building a life looked like. Not grand gestures or dramatic moments, but quiet decisions made over tea in a warm cabin while the fire burned low. When they finally said goodnight and retreated to their separate rooms, Mira lay in bed thinking about the future they were planning. A future that stretched years ahead, full of work and weather and endless small decisions. A future she'd chosen, that she continued to choose every single day. Summer arrived in full force, bringing heat that baked the rocks and turned the high meadows into carpets of wildflowers. The garden flourished. The baby birds fledged and flew away, though the mother bird returned to the rosebush to build another nest. Life cycled forward, patient and persistent. One afternoon in July, a year almost to the day since Mira had first arrived, they made a trip to Mountain View for supplies. The journey that had once felt monumental now seemed routine. Load the wagon, hitch Daisy, navigate the familiar road down. Mountain View looked the same as always, quiet and small, tucked into its valley. But when Cole pulled up in front of the mercantile, something was different. Pike came out to meet them. "Cole, Mira," he said, actually smiling. "Good to see you. Here for your usual order?" "That's right," Cole said, his voice cautious. "Come on in. I've set aside some things I thought you might need." Pike held the door, which still stuck, some things never changed, and gestured them inside. The mercantile was busier than Mira remembered. Several customers browsed the shelves, including Margaret Winters, who waved when she saw Mira. Pike had indeed set aside supplies. Good quality flour, fresh coffee, even some items they hadn't ordered but might need. He tallied everything up efficiently and gave them a fair price without argument. When Cole counted out payment, Pike counted the change back carefully, then paused. "Actually, hold on." He went into the back room and emerged with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "This came in on the supply wagon last week. Addressed to you, Mira." Mira took the package, surprised. She hadn't ordered anything. "Go ahead and open it," Pike said. "I'm curious what it is." She unwrapped the paper carefully. Inside was a book, a Chinese-English dictionary, much nicer than the worn one she'd bought for a nickel. And tucked inside the front cover was a letter. From Wei. Mira's hands trembled as she opened it. The letter was longer than his first one, full of news about home and family and his own small triumphs. And at the end, a postscript. "I used some of the money you sent to buy this book. I'm learning English, too. Maybe someday I can come to America and see the land you own. Your successful older sister." Mira pressed the letter to her chest, fighting tears. "Good news?" Pike asked quietly. "Very good news," she managed. They finished their shopping and loaded the wagon. Margaret caught up with them outside. "I meant what I said before," she told Mira. "You're always welcome at the bakery, and we're starting a ladies' sewing circle next month. You should come." "I'll think about it," Mira said. "Please do. It would be nice to have you." On the ride back up the mountain, Mira clutched her brother's letter and the new dictionary, reading passages from both aloud to Cole. "He wants to come to America," she said, "someday, to see what we've built." "Then we'll make sure there's something worth seeing," Cole said. They reached the cabin as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across their 80 acres. Mira stood in front of the cabin, looking at everything they'd created, the sturdy walls, the productive garden, the fences that held against weather and time, the wild rose still blooming with stubborn determination. This was what she'd tell Wei about. Not the hardship or the cold or the endless work. Those were just the price of admission. What mattered was this, standing on land she owned, beside a man she trusted, having earned every inch of peace she felt. "Cole?" she said as they unloaded the wagon. "Yeah?" "Thank you for everything. For the chance you gave me." "Well," Cole set down the crate he was carrying and looked at her seriously. "Mira, you need to understand something. I gave you a job, a place to stay. Those were just things. Everything else, the person you became, the life you built, the respect you earned, you did that yourself. That was all you. We did it together." "Yeah," Cole said, a rare full smile crossing his weathered face. We did. That night they ate dinner on the porch, watching stars emerge one by one over the mountains. The air smelled like pine and wildflowers and the faint smoke from their cooking fire. Somewhere in the forest, an owl hunted. The rosebush rustled in the evening breeze. Mira thought about the journey that had brought her here. The ship from China, crowded and terrifying. The immigration station, dehumanizing and cruel. The weeks of rejection and hunger and desperation in a country that had promised gold but delivered only closed doors. And then Pike's Mercantile. The moment that could have broken her completely. She thought about kneeling on that floor, picking up rice grain by grain, feeling smaller than she'd ever felt in her life. She couldn't have known, in that moment, that a quiet man in the corner was watching. That he'd see something in her worth saving. That he'd offer her not charity, but honest work. A chance to prove herself. She couldn't have known that the hardest year of her life would also be the year she became who she was meant to be. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked. Mira looked at him. This man who'd given her a chance, who'd taught her to survive and then to thrive, who'd become her partner in every sense of the word. "I'm thinking," she said, "that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Cole raised his coffee cup. "To being where you're supposed to be. What?" Mira touched her cup to his. "To home." They drank, and the mountains stood silent around them, ancient and patient, bearing witness to two people who'd found each other at the right moment and built something that would last. The rosebush bloomed on, defying the odds, proving that beautiful things could grow in the unlikeliest places. All they needed was someone willing to tend them, to believe in their potential, to give them time and space to become what they were always meant to be. Mira had been that unlikely thing, and Cole had been the one willing to believe. Together, they'd created something neither could have built alone. And as the stars filled the sky above their mountain home, Mira knew with absolute certainty that no matter what challenges lay ahead, hard winters, difficult harvests, the endless work that mountain living demanded, they would face it together. Because that's what partners did. That's what home meant. And she was finally, truly, home.